The rift opened like a wound in reality itself, a tear between hell's judgment chambers and the scorched skin of a dead world. One moment, the Ghost Rider pursued a fleeing soul through corridors of eternal flame. The next, dimensional barriers shattered like glass, and he plunged through shrieking void into blinding sunlight and choking dust. The demonic motorcycle hit sand at 100 miles per hour, hellfire wheels carving twin trenches of molten glass. The impact should have been catastrophic. Instead, the bike roared triumph, flame erupting from its frame as it adapted to new terrain with supernatural hunger. The rider's skull blazed white-hot, eyeless sockets, flooding with recognition. A different world, but suffering recognized no borders. Guilt saturated this place like radiation. Behind him, the rift sealed with a sound like tearing metal. Ahead, endless wasteland stretched beneath a merciless sun, rust-colored sand, skeletal vehicle husks half buried in dunes, and on the heat-shimmer horizon, smoke pillars rising from what might be civilization or funeral pyres. The spirit of vengeance assessed its new prison, no matter. Hell was portable when you carried it in your bones. Johnny Blaze's consciousness, trapped passenger in the rider's skull, screamed questions into the void of demonic possession. Where are we? What happened? The spirit didn't answer. It never did. It only pointed toward guilt like a compass finding north. And in this wasteland, every direction reeked of innocent blood and survival's terrible mathematics. The motorcycle's engine growled, not combustion but damnation itself given mechanical voice. No fuel gauge because vengeance needed no gasoline. No water because the dead don't thirst. The rider twisted the throttle and hellfire vomited from twin exhaust pipes, igniting the air itself. Then the horizon moved. What seemed like distant rock formations resolved into vehicles, a war party of 12 machines, cobbled together monsters of scavenged metal and desperate engineering. They converged from 3 directions, closing the net with practiced efficiency. These weren't random survivors. These were hunters who'd spotted something impossible, a motorcycle that burned without consuming fuel, ridden by something that couldn't be human. The lead vehicle, a grotesque fusion of semi-truck and medieval battering ram, bristled with harpoons and crude ballistas. Its flanks sported the white handprint symbol, palm pressed in paint. Fingers splayed. War boys, fanatics who worshipped chrome and combustion, who sought glorious death on the Fury Road. They were about to receive education in damnation far beyond their chrome spray theology. The rider didn't slow, didn't swerve. The chain materialized in skeletal fingers, 30 feet of blackened links that dripped hellfire like burning oil. One smooth motion sent it whipping through superheated air toward the nearest pursuit vehicle, a motorcycle jury rigged with blades and spikes. The chain struck the bike's front wheel at 60 miles per hour. Metal shrieked and exploded. The vehicle disintegrated, frame twisting apart like foil, rider catapulting forward with momentum that should have killed him. He hit sand rolling, chrome-painted skin flash-burning where hellfire had splashed. The other war boys howled, not fear, but ecstasy. "Witness!" they screamed, voices raw with religious fervor. Chrome spray cans appeared, paint huffed deep into lungs, eyes rolling white with narcotic rapture. To die in pursuit of something this magnificent would guarantee Valhalla, or whatever chrome dream afterlife their cult promised. They didn't understand yet. Valhalla was a children's story. The rider knew the real architecture of the afterlife, and it didn't involve feasting or glory. The lead truck accelerated, war boys clinging to its sides like parasites, brandishing crude firearms and flaming spears. The rider's skull tracked their approach with inhuman precision. Bullets came first, Wild spray from automatic weapons held one-handed, accuracy sacrificed for volume. Rounds sparked off the motorcycle's frame, punched through the rider's leather jacket, shattered ribs and sternum. The spirit of vengeance noticed the way humans notice mosquito bites. Bones reformed instantly, hellfire cauterizing and rebuilding faster than damage could propagate. The jacket repaired itself, leather knitting closed with the same supernatural resilience as the flesh beneath. A war boy, chrome-painted torso gleaming with sweat and zealotry, leaned from the truck's side with a flaming harpoon. "I live, I die, I live again." He hurled the spear with chemically enhanced strength. The rider caught it one-handed, mid-flight. Hellfire consumed the weapon's shaft in an instant, leaving only molten metal dripping between skeletal fingers. Then he returned the favor, not with the harpoon, but with something worse: the penance stare. Eye sockets erupted with hellfire that wasn't light so much as concentrated judgment made visible. The beam struck the warboy square in the chest, and his scream shifted octaves, from battle cry to soul-deep agony, as every sin, every murder, every innocent he'd run down on the Fury Road played through his consciousness at once. The pain of every victim became his pain, amplified, unavoidable, absolute. He fell from the truck still screaming, body convulsing in sand, chrome paint unable to protect him from the one thing that pierced deeper than bullets. Guilt given form and fired back through his own neurons. The other war boys witnessed. They understood nothing except that their brother's death throes looked like torture, not glory. Confusion rippled through the war party, first hesitation they'd shown in years of suicidal charges. The rider didn't grant them time to process. He yanked the chain back with supernatural strength, the weapon responding like a living thing, and sent it lashing toward the truck's exposed engine block. Hellfire-wrapped links punched through sheet metal armor like it was tissue paper wrapped around the engine itself, and pulled. The entire engine block ripped free of its housing with the sound of tearing dinosaur. 2 tons of scavenged machinery flew backward, trailing oil and coolant, and crashed into a pursuing dune buggy. Both vehicles became instant wreckage, a chaos of twisted metal and screaming warboys trapped in debris. The truck, engineless, died immediately. It ground to a halt in a spray of sand, warboys tumbling from its sides in confusion. They'd never seen anything survive their hunting tactics, let alone obliterate half their party in under a minute. One warboy, younger than the others, face half chrome paint and half terror, raised a crude crossbow. His hands shook. What are you?" The Ghost Rider's skull turned toward him with mechanical precision. When the spirit spoke, its voice carried the resonance of damnation itself. Every damned soul's scream compressed into words. Vengeance! If you want to see more universes collide, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a crossover you'd want to see in the comments below. Until next time, the multiverse awaits. The remaining vehicles broke formation, war party discipline evaporating. Some tried to flee, others circled at distance, attempting to understand what tactical approach might work against something that regenerated from gunshots and threw around engines like toys. Their world operated on brutal but comprehensible rules. Enough bullets killed anything, enough speed outran any threat, enough chrome-painted courage won any battle. The Ghost Rider represented something outside their mathematics, something their Wasteland theology couldn't categorize or contain. The rider released the throttle, letting the demonic motorcycle idle with a sound like grinding teeth and breaking bones. He surveyed the carnage, burning vehicles, one war boy still writhing in penitent stare aftershocks, the others backing away with weapons lowered in something approaching religious awe. In the distance, more smoke. larger structures, civilization, or its post-apocalyptic corpse. The spirit of vengeance had arrived in a world where everyone was guilty, where survival demanded atrocity, where the line between victim and villain had eroded to nothing under relentless sun and resource scarcity. This would be interesting. The rider twisted the throttle. Hellfire erupted. The motorcycle screamed forward, leaving the shattered war party in a cloud of glass sand and the smell of brimstone mixing with gasoline fumes. Somewhere ahead, tyrants ruled, warlords enslaved. The strong devoured the weak in endless grinding cycles of violence. The Ghost Rider had work to do. If you want to see more sci-fi universes collide in ways that challenge everything these characters believe, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a crossover you'd want to see in the comments below. May the Force be with you. The war party's survivors limped back toward the Citadel, dragging wounded and spreading impossible stories. By the time they reached Immortan Joe's fortress, carved from canyon rock and crowned with water towers like perverted baptismal fonts, their tale had achieved mythological dimensions. A demon rider, hellfire that burned without fuel, death that didn't stick to its burning bones. The skull, always the skull, blazing like concentrated damnation. Immortan Joe listened from his breathing apparatus throne, tumor-ridden body sustained by machinery and cult of personality. His deformed face, half hidden behind transparent mask, betrayed no emotion as the war boys knelt and testified. But his eyes, shrewd despite physical decay, calculated possibilities. 20 miles out in the Wasteland, the Ghost Rider discovered his first test of judgment in this broken world. The settlement barely qualified for the name. 8 structures built from rusted shipping containers and car bodies clustered around a hand-pumped well that yielded perhaps 5 gallons per day. 37 people called it home, their survival measured in careful water rations and constant vigilance against raiders who'd kill for a single canteen. The rider's approach sent them scrambling for weapons. Pathetic arsenal. 2 functioning firearms with maybe 40 rounds between them. Crude spears, desperation. They formed a defensive line before their water source. Parents pushing children behind them. Elders gripping makeshift clubs with arthritic hands. The demonic motorcycle stopped 50 yards out, engine rumbling its infernal cadence. The rider dismounted, boots hitting sand with finality. His skull tracked each defender, and the spirit of vengeance read their souls like open books. The settlement's leader, woman in her 40s, face leathered by sun and hardship, raised a bolt-action rifle with barrel held together by wire and prayer. "Turn back, demon, we got nothing for you here." The rider's eyeless sockets blazed, but not with the penitent stare. Just observation, scanning, judging. He saw their sins written in soul-deep scars. The leader had shot a rival settlement's water scout 3 years ago. Ambush in a canyon, bullet through the spine, left him to die screaming while she stole his canteens. The man beside her had participated in a raid that burned out a family of 6, taking their supplies and leaving children to thirst. The elderly woman in back had poisoned a neighboring camp's water supply when they refused to share, killing 11 people with agonizing gut death. All guilty, all murderers, all absolutely eligible for the penitent stare's judgment. But the spirit paused. Johnny Blaze's human consciousness struggling toward the surface for the first time since arrival. Wait. Look deeper. Why did they kill? The leader shot the scout because her own daughter was dying of dehydration. Chose one stranger's death over her child's. The man burned the family out after they'd raided his settlement first, killing his brother. Retaliation, not aggression. The poisoner acted when the neighboring camp had stolen from them repeatedly, and her own people faced starvation, survival mathematics, kill or be killed, murder or watch your loved ones die. The Wasteland's terrible calculus repeated endlessly, the spirit of vengeance designed to judge absolute guilt and punish the wicked confronted moral ambiguity for perhaps the first time in its existence. These people were guilty. These people were victims. Both truths coexisted inseparable. The leader's rifle trembled. "I said back, I'll shoot. Won't kill something like you, but..." The Ghost Rider raised one skeletal hand, not threatening, stopping. When he spoke, the demonic resonance carried something unexpected. Restraint. "Your water." "It's ours. We dug this well. We defend it. Is poisoned." Silence crashed across the settlement. The rifle lowered slightly. "What?" The rider's skull tilted toward the well. "Arsenic, seeping from buried waste 300 yards northeast. Old world dumping ground. Your water kills slowly. Children first." The woman's face drained of color beneath the tan. You're lying, trying to..." "6 months," the spirit continued, pitiless accuracy. "Your youngest show symptoms, stomach pain, weakness. You attributed it to malnutrition." A gasp from the crowd. A mother clutching a thin boy, maybe 7, maybe 12. Malnutrition made ages impossible to guess, whose perpetual belly cramps had been dismissed as hunger. Understanding dawned like horror. "There's a spring," the rider said. 15 miles northwest, clean water. Underground stream, pre-war aquifer, untouched by surface contamination. Enough for 100 people. "How do you..." The leader's question died. This thing arrived on a burning motorcycle that needed no fuel. How it knew anything seemed irrelevant compared to that it knew. "Why tell us?" Different voice. The man who'd burned the family. Suspicion overriding gratitude. "What do you want?" The Ghost Rider's skull tracked toward him specifically. For a moment, hellfire flared in those empty sockets, and the man saw his own sins reflected. Children screaming in burning containers, the smell of cooking flesh, his own hands throwing the torches. He fell to his knees, vomit rising, but the penitent stare didn't fully manifest. The rider pulled it back, exercise of restraint that seemed to physically pain the spirit's demonic nature. "Nothing," the rider said, "but know this, mercy given must be mercy shown. The strong who prey on the weak, the tyrants who hoard water while others die. When I find them..." Hellfire erupted from skeletal hands for emphasis. "There will be no mercy there." He turned back toward the motorcycle, paused, spoke without facing them. "Northwest, 15 miles. Look for the rock formation shaped like a breaking wave. Dig at its base, 3 feet down." Then he mounted the demonic bike, and hellfire consumed doubt. The throttle twisted. The rider launched forward in a spray of molten sand, leaving the settlement behind with their impossible salvation and terrifying savior. Johnny Blaze's consciousness briefly surfaced, got shoved back down into the darkness, but the question echoed. What happens when the spirit of vengeance finds a world where everyone's guilty and innocent simultaneously? The answer roared ahead on the Fury Road. Selective judgment. The rider would distinguish between those who killed from desperation and those who killed from cruelty. Between victims forced into violence and predators who chose it. Immortan Joe, chrome-painted fanatic with delusions of godhood, hoarding water while thousands died of thirst. That was clear-cut damnation. The war parties and raiders who followed him, many of them enslaved or conditioned from birth into violence. That would require examination case by case. The Wasteland's moral complexity would test the spirit's absolute judgment. For the first time in its existence, Vengeance would need wisdom. 10 miles ahead, dust clouds rose. Another war party, this one 20 vehicles strong. Word had spread. Immortan Joe wanted this demon rider brought to the Citadel, alive if possible, destroyed if necessary. The war party carried nets, chains, and improvised EMPs, scavenged from old-world military wreckage, tools designed to stop engines and disable vehicles. They had no idea Hellfire didn't run on electricity. The lead vehicle, a massive war rig bristling with harpoons and war boys howling chrome dreams, accelerated toward collision course. Its driver, face painted white, save for black handprint over his mouth, huffed chrome spray and screamed glory into the wind. The Ghost Rider didn't slow, didn't swerve. The chain appeared in his hand like a snake remembering it had always been there. 30 feet of hellfire-wrapped judgment, each link forged in damnation itself, hungry for the guilty. Distance closed, 500 yards, 300, 100. The war rig's ballista fired, 6-foot harpoon trailing cable, designed to pierce an anchor. The rider twisted, impossibly fast, and the harpoon passed through space where his skull had been a microsecond before. It buried itself in sand, trailing cable like intestine. 50 yards. The rider stood on the motorcycle seat, balance supernatural. The chain whipped forward, hellfire trailing like comet tail. It struck the war rig's front axle and wrapped, links tightening with sentient hunger. 20 yards. The rider leaped, skeletal figure airborne, leather jacket flaring, hellfire streaming. The motorcycle continued forward on momentum, guidance unnecessary. The chain yanked, and 2 tons of war rig's front end ripped sideways at 70 miles per hour. Physics became carnage. The rig's front wheels locked instantly, but the vehicle's mass had momentum demanding outlet. It flipped, graceful, almost slow motion, massive frame cartwheeling through air. War boys flew like insects scattered from a kicked nest, bodies tumbling, chrome paint catching sunlight for frozen moments before impact with unforgiving earth. The Ghost Rider landed on the overturned war rig's undercarriage as it ground to a halt in catastrophic spray of sand and twisted metal. He rode the wreckage like a surfboard, hellfire boots melting through steel until momentum died. Then he stepped off into Hell's own killing ground. 19 vehicles remained. All of them converged. The battle lasted 4 minutes. The legend would last forever. 19 vehicles became a steel noose tightening around the Ghost Rider, engines roaring discord against the hellfire motorcycle's demonic growl. War boys hung from every surface. Doors, roofs, improvised platforms welded to frames. Weapons raised, chrome spray still wet on their lips, pupils dilated with narcotic certainty of glorious death. They got the death part right. A dune buggy, stripped to skeletal frame and massive engine, accelerated from the rider's blind spot. Its driver, face painted to resemble a grinning skull, in mockery of death itself, aimed for vehicular impact at 60 miles per hour. The war boy passenger stood upright through the roll cage, swinging a flaming chain, crude imitation of the rider's own weapon. The Ghost Rider turned his skull toward them. One skeletal hand extended, palm out. Hellfire erupted from his hand like napalm shotgun blast. The wave of supernatural flame crossed 30 yards instantaneously, engulfed the dune buggy's front end, and converted metal to slag. The engine block melted like wax, frame liquefied, tires exploded into burning rubber rain. The vehicle collapsed forward, momentum carrying it into tumbling disaster. Both war boys ejected through disintegration, screaming, bodies trailing hellfire like burning flags. They hit sand rolling and the flames didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Hellfire burned souls, not just flesh. One war boy managed to stand, staggered 3 steps, while fire consumed him from inside out, then collapsed into ash that blew away on superheated wind. The other vehicles didn't slow, couldn't process the impossibility fast enough to trigger survival instinct. They'd been conditioned since childhood. Witness, Chrome, Valhalla. Death was glory. Fear was weakness. The Ghost Rider would teach them the difference between glorious death and simple damnation. 2 motorcycles, riders painted head to toe in white, clutching crude explosives, flanked from opposite sides. Kamikaze run. They'd detonate on impact, sacrifice themselves to eliminate the target. The left rider pulled his detonator pin early, explosive charge already smoking. 3 seconds to impact. The rider's chain lashed out impossibly fast, wrapped around the suicide bomber's torso mid-acceleration. 1 yank, and the war boy flew from his bike, explosive still clutched to his chest. The rider spun once, skeletal figure pirouetting with the grace of death itself, and hurled the war boy directly into the path of a pursuing truck. The explosion vaporized the kamikaze, shredded the truck's grille, and sent it careening sideways into 2 other vehicles. Metal screamed against metal, frames interlocked, wheels tangled. 3 vehicles became one catastrophic pile of momentum and confusion. The second suicide bomber reached the rider, explosive charge primed, finger on detonator. His chrome-painted face split in a grin of pure religious ecstasy. Witness M. The penance stare hit him like a freight train made of guilt. Hellfire erupted from the rider's eye sockets, twin beams of concentrated judgment that pierced chrome paint, skin, bone, directly into the war boy's soul. Every raid, every innocent run down on the Fury Road, every child left to die of thirst while he hoarded water for Immortan Joe's war machine. The pain of every victim flooded his nervous system simultaneously. Thousands of deaths, each one experienced in excruciating detail, compressed into 3 seconds of absolute agony. His finger never reached the detonator. He fell from his bike mid-scream, body convulsing, foam erupting from his mouth, eyes rolled back so far only whites showed. The motorcycle continued forward riderless, crashed into sand, explosive tumbling loose but failing to detonate. The Ghost Rider caught the dead man's bike one-handed as it passed, redirected its momentum and hurled the entire machine, 200 pounds of metal and chrome, directly into a war buggy attempting flanking maneuver. The collision crumpled both vehicles, sent them spinning into the wasteland's emptiness. 12 vehicles remained. The war party's coordination shattered. Individual drivers made individual choices, and chaos consumed tactical discipline. A war truck, flatbed loaded with war boys wielding harpoon guns, accelerated head-on. Suicidal bravery or calculated sacrifice, it didn't matter. 6 harpoons fired simultaneously, cables trailing, designed to entangle and immobilize. The Ghost Rider's demonic motorcycle responded before he consciously commanded it. The bike reared like a stallion, front wheel lifting, hellfire erupting from exhaust, in concentrated jet stream. The thrust launched both rider and machine 10 feet vertically, harpoons passing harmlessly beneath. At apex, the rider swung his chain in full circle overhead. Hellfire chain met harpoon cables, and supernatural flame consumed steel lines like they were spider silk. 6 cables severed simultaneously, fell to earth, trailing ember ends. The motorcycle landed on the war truck's flatbed. War boys scattered, but there was nowhere to go. The rider stood atop his bike in the truck's center, chain whipping in figure-8 patterns that left hellfire contrails. Each strike found flesh. Chain wrapped around torsos, yanked war boys over the flatbed's edge into grinding doom beneath wheels. Hellfire ignited chrome paint, turned fanatics into screaming torches that dove from the vehicle seeking relief that wouldn't come. The truck's driver, panicking, yanked the wheel hard left. The sharp turn at 60 miles per hour should have thrown the rider clear. Instead, skeletal fingers gripped the flatbed's edge, supernatural strength anchoring him as war boys flew into oblivion. When the truck straightened, the Ghost Rider remained, alone among corpses and flames. He stepped forward, boots leaving burning footprints on metal, and dropped through the flatbed's front opening directly behind the driver. The war boy spun, crude pistol rising. "Witness!" The rider's skeletal hand closed around the man's face, not crushing, holding, examining. This one was young, maybe 16, maybe 20. Chemical abuse and hard living made age indeterminate. His soul carried fewer sins than the others, forced into service as child, conditioned into fanaticism through isolation and propaganda. Still guilty of murder, but guilt layered with victimhood, complicated by brainwashing. Johnny Blaze's consciousness surged. He's a kid. He doesn't know any better. They made him into this. The spirit of vengeance warred with human mercy, judgment versus compassion. The war boy had killed. The war boy had been shaped into a weapon by others, both true simultaneously. The rider released him, shoved him from the driver's seat toward the passenger side. "Drive away," the demonic voice commanded. "Abandon the Fury Road, find clean water and a different life." The war boy stared, chrome paint running with terrified sweat. I serve Immortan Joe. I live, I die, You live," the rider interrupted, hellfire flaring for emphasis. "Or you burn. Choose." The war boy chose survival. He dove from the truck's cab, hit sand rolling, sprinted toward the horizon without looking back. Behind him, the driverless truck careened off course, slowed, died with sputtering engine coughs. 9 vehicles remained, but their aggression had transformed into self-preservation. They scattered like insects from lifted rock, each driver calculating that glory mattered less than not experiencing whatever hell judgment the demon rider delivered. The Ghost Rider let them go. They'd spread the word faster than any he killed. Something walked the wasteland that made war boys flee. Something that burned without fuel and judged without mercy. Something that made Immortan Joe's chrome dream theology look like children's bedtime stories. The rider remounted his demonic motorcycle, surveyed the wreckage field, burning vehicles, screaming wounded. The dead, simply dead. 15 vehicles destroyed, 4 fled. 1 war boy granted mercy. The mathematics of judgment in a world without clear villains or heroes. Ahead, the citadel rose from heat shimmer like a mirage of stone and desperation. Water towers crowned its heights, precious liquid hoarded while thousands died of thirst below. Immortan Joe's fortress, built on suffering and maintained through violence. That was clarity the spirit understood. That was guilt without complication, but first movement from the wreckage. A war boy crushed beneath his overturned vehicle, still alive, chrome paint blackened with burns and blood. He struggled weakly, pinned, dying slowly. The rider approached, looked down at the trapped man. The war boy's eyes focused, pupils dilated beyond chrome spray into death's approach. "Am I witnessed?" he whispered, voice wet with internal bleeding. The Ghost Rider crouched beside him. Skeletal fingers touched the war boy's forehead. Not judgment, not mercy, just acknowledgement. "You are witnessed," the rider said. "No hellfire, no demonic resonance, just statement of fact." The war boy smiled, blood on his teeth. "Then I'll ride eternal, shiny and chrome." He died believing it. The rider stood, left him that final comfort. Whatever afterlife awaited, probably not Valhalla, probably something far less glorious, The man had died with purpose, intact. There was mercy in that, twisted as Wasteland mercy always was. The motorcycle roared. Hellfire painted the sand. The Ghost Rider accelerated toward the Citadel, leaving behind a battlefield that would birth a legend. The devil had come to the Fury Road, and not even war boys witnessed glory anymore. Only damnation delivered on burning wheels. The Citadel loomed against the evening sky, a monument to tyranny carved from canyon stone, festooned with the bones of vehicles and men. Water towers dominated its crown, each one a vertical lake hoarded by Immortan Joe, while the wretched masses below died with cracked lips and swollen tongues. Elevator platforms rose and descended on chains, delivering violence upward and oppression downward in mechanical rhythm. The Ghost Rider stopped 2 miles out, where rocky terrain offered vantage and concealment. The demonic motorcycle idled between boulders, hellfire reduced to low burn flicker. The rider's skull surveyed the fortress through senses that pierced stone and saw souls like neon signs. Hundreds of them, war boys in their barracks, chrome-painted and chrome-brained, conditioned from birth into disposable fanaticism. The Imperators, Immortan Joe's elite warriors, less expendable, more calculating. The wretched, enslaved thousands trapped in the Citadel's lower reaches, mining gasoline, pumping water, sustaining the machine that crushed them. And at the summit, bloated with tumors and self-importance, Immortan Joe himself. The tyrant's soul blazed with guilt so absolute it would have been impressive if it weren't so monstrous. Thousands murdered, children bred as livestock for organ harvesting, water wielded as weapon, doled out in teaspoon amounts while gallons vanished into war boy radiators and chrome spray production. A self-proclaimed god who'd built his divinity on dehydrated corpses. That one the spirit of vengeance understood perfectly. That one earned the penitent stare without complication or mercy. But approach presented challenges even for an entity that regenerated from bullets. The Citadel's defenses weren't designed for modern warfare. They were designed for wasteland pragmatism. Choke points, narrow approaches, platforms where war boys could rain crude explosives and harpoons from above. No amount of hellfire made the rider immune to being buried under tons of deliberately collapsed rock. Strategic patience was required, something the spirit of vengeance possessed in abundance. It had hunted souls for millennia, and vengeance aged like wine, growing more potent with time. Movement below, a war party returning from patrol, 5 vehicles trailing dust plumes. They approached the Citadel's main entrance, slowed for identification protocols. Even from 2 miles, the rider's supernatural senses detected their agitation. Survivors from earlier battles spreading news of the demon rider. Then, unexpected development. A vehicle departed the Citadel. Not a war rig, but something sleeker, a car, relatively intact, chrome-polished until it reflected the dying sun like liquid mirror. It carried 4 passengers, 3 Imperators and someone else, someone whose soul didn't shine with war boy fanaticism or elite warrior calculation. Prisoner? Diplomat? The rider couldn't determine from distance. The car headed northeast, away from the Citadel, following what passed for road in the wasteland, compacted sand and ancient asphalt fragments, purpose unclear but opportunity crystalline. Isolate, interrogate, gather intelligence about Immortan Joe's fortress and defenses. The Ghost Rider mounted his motorcycle. Hellfire erupted. The chase began. The car had 10-minute head start and lighter weight. Didn't matter. The demonic motorcycle didn't obey physics so much as tolerate them. It accelerated to speeds that should have shaken itself apart, suspension-absorbing terrain that would have destroyed conventional vehicles, hellfire wheels finding traction on sand where rubber would have foundered. The gap closed in 5 minutes. The car's occupants noticed pursuit. Hard not to when a burning skull on a flaming motorcycle materialized in your rearview mirror. The driver accelerated, engine screaming, but combustion couldn't outrun damnation. The Imperators readied weapons, one leaning from a window with automatic rifle, another preparing some kind of jury-rigged explosive launcher. The rider drew his chain, no flourish, just smooth economy of supernatural motion. 30 feet of hellfire-wrapped judgment extended behind him like comet tail, then whipped forward with velocity that bent air into visible distortion. The chain struck the car's rear bumper, wrapped around the axle, locked tight. Then the rider pulled. The car's back end lifted, wheels leaving ground, frame twisting as forward momentum fought supernatural strength. Metal shrieked protest. The vehicle slewed sideways, threatened to flip. Driver overcorrecting desperately. For 3 seconds, physics and hellfire contested dominance. Physics lost. The Ghost Rider yanked harder. The entire rear axle ripped free of the car's undercarriage. Wheels still attached. Transmission shredded. Drive shaft torn loose in a spray of mechanical viscera. The car's back end dropped, frame grinding sand in fountain of sparks. Momentum carried it forward another 30 yards before friction murdered velocity. The rider released the chain, let the severed axle tumble away into wasteland oblivion. He approached the disabled vehicle at casual speed, hellfire painting everything in orange and shadow nightmare. No hurry, they weren't going anywhere. The Imperators emerged, weapons raised. These weren't chrome spray fanatics, they were professionals. Survivors who'd earned their positions through competence rather than zealotry. Their chrome-plated armor was functional, not decorative. Their weapons well-maintained. Ammunition carefully rationed. Movements coordinated. "Form up," the lead Imperator commanded. Woman, face scarred by old burns, eyes cold as the stars. Her subordinates spread in tactical formation, creating crossfire angles, maximizing coverage. The Ghost Rider stopped 20 feet away, dismounted, stood with skeletal hands hanging loose, unthreatening but radiating menace like heat from pavement. "Immortan Joe sent you," the rider asked, demonic voice scraping across eardrums. "We don't answer to demons," the lead Imperator spat, her rifle centered on the rider's skull. "You've killed war boys, destroyed vehicles, threatened the Citadel's security. Joe wants you brought in, dead or alive, preferably alive, but dead's acceptable. He wants to understand what I am. He wants to dissect you, figure out how you burn without fuel, maybe replicate it." She smiled without warmth. "Imagine war boys who never need gasoline, an army that runs on hellfire instead of petroleum. You'd make Joe's empire unstoppable." Johnny Blaze's consciousness stirred with horror at the implications. The spirit of vengeance felt something closer to amusement, as if mortals could harness hell itself. "Tell Joe," the rider said, "that I'm coming for him. Tomorrow when the sun sets, I'll walk through the Citadel's front entrance and I'll burn every guilty soul between me and his throne." The Imperator's finger tightened on the trigger. "Joe doesn't receive threats. Not a threat, promise," she fired. The 3-round burst caught the rider center mass. Chest shots, perfect grouping, the kind of accuracy that came from thousands of rounds downrange and lives spent in combat. Bullets punched through leather, shattered ribs, pulped supernatural organs that didn't technically need to function. The Ghost Rider looked down at the wounds, looked back up at the Imperator. Hellfire cauterized the injuries instantly, bones reforming, flesh knitting, jacket repairing itself. "I wasn't finished," he continued as if the gunfire had been mosquito annoyance. "Tomorrow at sunset, anyone who abandons the Citadel before then gets to live. Anyone who stays and fights. Hellfire erupted from his eye sockets. For emphasis, gets judged. The second Imperator opened fire, full automatic spray. The third launched his explosive, crude grenade trailing smoke. The lead Imperator dove for cover behind the disabled car. Bullets sparked off the rider's skull, tore through his torso, shredded leather and bone. The explosive detonated at his feet, blast wave powerful enough to crater sand and send shrapnel in a lethal radius. When the smoke cleared, the Ghost Rider stood untouched. Not unharmed, the damage had occurred, but regeneration outpaced destruction. Hellfire rebuilding faster than bullets could destroy. The Imperator stared. Professional composure cracked around the edges. They'd seen people survive improbable injuries through adrenaline and luck. They'd never seen someone survive point-blank grenade and automatic fire through sheer impossibility. "Last chance," the rider said. "Deliver my message. Abandon your tyrant or burn with him." A sound from the disabled car, the fourth passenger, the one who wasn't Imperator, emerging with hands raised. The rider's skull tracked toward them. Woman, maybe 30, dressed in rough woven cloth rather than chrome and leather, face bearing old scars and new desperation. Her soul complicated, guilt present but context murky. She'd killed, yes, 2 people. Specific memories burned into her consciousness, but she'd also saved dozens, risked everything to smuggle water to the wretched, undermined Immortan Joe's authority through small acts of rebellion that accumulated into genuine resistance. "You're really going to attack the Citadel?" she asked, voice steady despite obvious terror. "Tomorrow?" "Yes." "Then I'm coming with you." The Imperator spun toward her. "Dog, you stupid—" "I wasn't asking permission." Dog's eyes fixed on the Ghost Rider with intensity that cut through fear. "I'm one of Joe's breeders. Was, anyway, until I stopped producing healthy offspring. He's sending me to Gastown to be recycled." The word carried weight of horror. "If you're killing Joe, I want to watch him burn." The lead Imperator raised her weapon toward Dog. "Joe said deliver you alive. Didn't say undamaged." The Ghost Rider's chain moved faster than human eyes could track. It wrapped around the Imperator's rifle, yanked the weapon from her hands, sent it tumbling into darkness. When she reached for a sidearm, hellfire erupted from the sand at her feet, not burning her, just warning, a wall of flame between her and Dog. "She comes with me," the rider said. Final statement, no negotiation implied. The Imperators understood power dynamics. 3 against 1 didn't matter when the one regenerated from explosions and threw around hellfire like party favors. The lead Imperator straightened, jaw tight with impotent rage. "Joe will hear about this," she said. "Good. Tell him exactly what you saw. Tell him I gave warning. Tell him that tomorrow judgment comes to the Citadel whether he's ready or not." The rider turned toward Dog. "You can ride or walk. Choice is yours." Dog looked at the demonic motorcycle, frame wreathed in hellfire, exhaust smoking with brimstone, chrome skull decoration on the fuel tank that seemed to grin with malevolent hunger. Then she looked at the Imperators, at her certain death waiting in Gastown's refineries. "I'll ride." She approached the motorcycle like someone approaching a wild animal, swung her leg over the seat behind the rider, settled into place with visible tension. The hellfire didn't burn her, recognized her as passenger rather than threat. The Ghost Rider mounted, twisted the throttle. Before acceleration, he looked back at the Imperators one final time. Sunset tomorrow, anyone with sense will be far away. Then hellfire roared, and the motorcycle launched into Wasteland darkness, leaving the Imperators stranded with their disabled car and impossible story. The lead Imperator watched them disappear, then keyed her radio. Long-range unit, precious salvage from old-world military. Command, this is Scout 7. The Demon Rider confirmed real, engaged, and failed to neutralize. He's coming for the Citadel tomorrow at sunset, and he's bringing one of Joe's breeders with him. Static crackled. Then Immortan Joe's voice, distorted through breathing apparatus. Let him come. Prepare the defenses. If he wants to die on our canyon walls, we'll grant him that wish. No demon stronger than the Citadel. The Imperator closed the channel, looked at her subordinates, said nothing, but her expression spoke volumes. She'd shot the Demon Rider point blank, watched him regenerate from grenade blast, witnessed him pluck their prisoner away like taking candy from children. The Citadel's walls might not be enough. 20 miles from the Citadel, the Ghost Rider stopped at an abandoned gas station. Skeletal structure of rusted metal and shattered glass, its pumps long since dry. The demonic motorcycle idled near what had once been the service bay. Hellfire painting petroglyphs of shadow and flame across crumbling walls. Dog dismounted carefully, legs unsteady from riding something that vibrated with damnation rather than combustion. She stared at the rider for a long moment, processing impossibility, then walked to the station's edge and vomited. Fear, adrenaline crash, or just the accumulated horror of the day. She didn't specify, and the rider didn't ask. When she finished, wiping her mouth with shaking hands, she turned back to face him. What are you? Vengeance. That's not an answer. The Ghost Rider's skull tilted slightly, considering. Johnny Blaze's consciousness stirred, pushed toward the surface with information the spirit rarely bothered sharing. When the rider spoke again, the demonic resonance softened fractionally, still inhuman, but carrying thread of something that remembered humanity. I'm a spirit, an entity of judgment and punishment. I hunt the guilty, make them feel the pain they've inflicted on others. I was pursuing a warlord through hell when a rift opened and pulled me into your world. Dog processed this. Hell's real. Very. And you're from there? I serve there. I wasn't born in hell. I was bound to the spirit of vengeance in a different world, a different life. The rider paused, skeletal fingers flexing. The man I was. He's still in here, trapped, watching. Sometimes I let him surface. Sometimes the spirit needs his humanity to judge correctly. Like with me, Dog said quietly. You could have left me with the Imperators, could have let them take me to Gastown. But you didn't. You're guilty of murder. 2 kills. A war boy who discovered your water smuggling, and an Imperator who caught you sabotaging chrome spray production. But you killed to save others. The war boy would have executed 20 people. The Imperator would have revealed your resistance network, gotten dozens more killed. Your guilt is, the rider searched for words, contaminated by necessity. This world makes murderers of everyone, then asks them to live with it. Dog laughed bitterly. That's the Wasteland. Kill or be killed, hoard or starve. There are no heroes here, demon. Just survivors and corpses. I've met survivors who didn't become monsters. Then you met exceptions, not the rule. She sat on a rusted fuel pump, exhaustion catching up with adrenaline. Immortan Joe controls the water, not just hoards it, controls it absolutely. The Citadel sits on the only clean aquifer for 100 miles. He doles it out like a god dispensing mercy, makes people worship him for survival's most basic necessity. Those who resist die of thirst. Those who serve get just enough to keep them desperate and compliant. I saw a settlement, told them where to find clean water. Dog's head snapped up. You what? 15 miles northwest of their location, underground spring, pre-war aquifer, enough for hundreds. If that's true, if there's water Joe doesn't control, Dog stood, excitement cutting through exhaustion. That changes everything. The only reason his empire works is monopoly. If people have alternative sources, then they can resist without dying of thirst, the rider finished. But they'll need protection. Joe won't let his water monopoly break without retaliation. So you're not just killing Joe, you're trying to break his power structure. The Ghost Rider stood silent for a moment. Truthfully, the spirit of vengeance hadn't planned that far ahead. It existed to punish the guilty, not architect revolutions. But Johnny Blaze's consciousness, growing stronger the longer the spirit remained in this morally complex world, pushed strategic thinking forward. If I kill Joe without dismantling his system, someone else takes his place. Another tyrant. Same exploitation, different face. But if I kill Joe while revealing water sources he's hidden, while proving his divine control is just geographic luck and cruelty. The rider's skull turned toward the citadel's distant silhouette. Then maybe something better grows from the ashes. You sound like a revolutionary. I'm vengeance. But vengeance without strategy is just violence. Your world taught me that. Dog studied the burning skull, seeing past the horror to something unexpected. Hope, twisted and wrapped in hellfire, but hope nonetheless. There are others like me, breeders who've outlived their usefulness, mechanics Joe plans to discard, war boys who've started questioning the chrome dream theology, even some imperators who serve because it beats dying, not because they believe. She leaned forward. If you're really attacking tomorrow, those people need warning, need to know they can run or fight alongside you or become witnesses, the rider interrupted. When I judge Immortan Joe, when I make him feel every drop of water he's denied the thirsty, every child he's bred like livestock, every throat parched to death while he bathed in excess, others need to see it, need to understand that tyrants bleed and burn like everyone else. The penance stare, Dog said, remembering the war boy who'd fallen screaming earlier, experiencing his own sins reflected back. You'll use it on Joe? Until his mind breaks or his heart stops, whichever comes first. A sound in the distance, engines, multiple vehicles approaching fast. The rider's skull tracked toward the noise, supernatural senses analyzing 6 war rigs, 40 war boys converging from 2 directions. Not random patrol, hunting party coordinated, searching the grid systematically. They're looking for us, Dog said, voice tight. Joe doesn't tolerate defiance. He'll send every war boy between here and the Citadel to let them come. There's too many. Even you can't. I don't need to kill them all. Just show them what happens when they serve a false god. The rider mounted his motorcycle, Dog scrambling to join him. Hold tight. This will be violent. Everything in the Wasteland is violent. Hellfire erupted. The motorcycle launched from the gas station like a missile, accelerating toward the incoming war party rather than away. Dog's scream, fear, or exhilaration trailed behind them like prayer. The war rigs spread out, forming interception pattern. Flankers moved to cut off escape routes. The center vehicles prepared for head-on engagement. War boys hanging from every surface. Weapons bristling chrome spray huffed until their eyes rolled with chemically induced fearlessness. The Ghost Rider aimed directly at the center formation's lead vehicle, massive war rig, its hood decorated with chrome skulls and painted flames, a mockery of the real thing. Its driver, face white with paint and black with exhaust stains, screamed challenge into the wind. Distance closed. 300 yards, 200, 100. The war rig's mounted guns opened fire. automatic weapons duct-taped and welded to roll bars, ammunition expenditure that would horrify any tactician, but was standard for war boys who measured life in glorious seconds rather than careful years. Bullets filled the air like steel rain. The Ghost Rider wove through the barrage, motorcycle responding to thought rather than input, physics-defying turns that left bullet trajectories confused and impotent. Return fire came not from weapons, but from the rider himself. Hellfire thrown from his hands like grenades, each blast impacting war rig armor and melting through metal like acid through flesh. A war boy, struck by hellfire splash, tumbled from his perch, screaming, body burning with flame that wouldn't extinguish. He hit sand rolling, flames spreading until he stopped moving and only ash remained. 50 yards. The war rig's driver, commitment absolute, held course. Collision imminent. 3 tons of metal versus 1 motorcycle. Mathematics simple even for chrome-addled brains. The Ghost Rider stood on his motorcycle's seat, balanced impossibly at 80 miles per hour. Chain materializing in skeletal hands. One smooth motion sent 30 feet of hellfire-wrapped judgment whipping forward. The chain struck the war rig's front grille, punctured through radiator and engine block, wrapped around the drive shaft. Then the rider jumped, skeletal figure airborne, leather jacket flaring, dog somehow still clinging to him, through supernatural cohesion. They sailed over the war rig's hood, over the roll cage, over the screaming war boys who tracked their flight with chrome-painted confusion. Behind them, the chain yanked tight. The war rig's engine exploded, not mechanical failure, but hellfire detonation. Supernatural flame igniting fuel and oil and steel itself. The vehicle became a fireball, frame contorting, war boys ejecting in burning trajectories, ammunition cooking off in chain reaction catastrophe. The Ghost Rider and dog landed on the second war rig in the formation. Softer landing than physics should permit. Supernatural forces absorbing impact. The rider's boots hit the vehicle's roof, his chain already whipping toward the flanking vehicles. The war boys on this rig reacted instantly, crawling up toward the intruders with weapons raised. But they weren't fighting a human. They were fighting something that had hunted damned souls through hell's infinite corridors, something that knew violence like poets knew verse. The rider's fist, skeletal wrapped in hellfire, punched through the nearest war boy's chest, not penetrating flesh, but igniting soul. The man screamed, hellfire erupting from his eyes and mouth, body convulsing as supernatural flame consumed him from inside out. He fell from the rig, still burning, trailing smoke like a falling star. Another war boy swung a crude sword, car spring hammered into blade shape, edge jagged but effective. The weapon struck the rider's neck, should have decapitated, instead shattered against supernatural bone. The recoil numbed the war boy's arms, and in that moment of shock, the rider grabbed him by the throat. "How many have you killed?" The demonic voice asked, not quite activating the penitent stare, just asking. "12, the war boy stammered, chrome spray courage evaporating under hellfire grip. "Witnessed all of them. Were they warriors or the wretched? Think carefully." The war boy's eyes widened, realization dawning. 3 were raiders, 9 were just survivors, trying to reach water. Joe said they were thieves, said. Joe lied. The Ghost Rider released him, shoved him toward the rig's edge. "Run. Find the settlement 15 miles northwest of the rock formation, shaped like a breaking wave. Tell them the Demon Rider sent you. Tell them you're seeking forgiveness through service instead of death through glory." The war boy stared, mind breaking under the weight of choice. First real choice he'd been offered, since childhood conditioning began. Then he jumped, hit sand rolling, scrambled to his feet and ran into Wasteland darkness without looking back. 3 war boys remained on the rig. They watched their brother flee, watched the demon rider burn their comrades, watched their entire belief system, Chrome and Glory and Valhalla, revealed as hollow mythology against genuine supernatural force. One by one they jumped, chose life over glory, chose doubt over certainty. The remaining war rigs, witnessing this impossible battle, made tactical decisions. 2 fled, engines screaming retreat. 3 circled, seeking advantage. But their coordination had shattered, replaced with self-preservation that undermined Immortan Joe's death cult discipline. The Ghost Rider stood atop the war rig's roof, Dog clinging to him like passenger on the world's most terrifying theme park ride, and surveyed the chaos he'd created. Not just destroyed vehicles and dead war boys, something more insidious planted seeds of doubt. War boys had jumped rather than fight, had chosen survival over witnessed glory. The Citadel's foundation wasn't stone and water, it was belief. And belief, once cracked, spread fractures through everything. Tomorrow's assault wouldn't just be one demon versus one fortress. It would be the spark hitting gasoline-soaked kindling, igniting revolution through revelation, that gods bleed, tyrants fall, and glory is just another word for meaningless death. The rider twisted his chain and the war rig beneath him ground to mechanical halt, engine seizing. He and Dog dismounted, and the demonic motorcycle, which had been following autonomously, pulled alongside. "Tomorrow," the rider said to Dog, "you'll witness more than today." "I'm ready," she replied, though her shaking hands suggested otherwise. They rode into darkness, leaving behind burning vehicles and war boys who would spread impossible stories. The Citadel loomed ahead, water towers silhouetted against stars, awaiting judgment it couldn't comprehend and couldn't prevent. Immortan Joe would have one night to prepare. It wouldn't be enough. Dawn broke over the wasteland like a wound, red and angry, promising heat that would kill the unprepared. The Ghost Rider had not slept because the dead don't tire. Dog had managed maybe 3 hours, curled against a boulder in the abandoned rest stop where they'd made camp, dreaming of water and waking to find her throat still parched despite the rider's promise of springs and salvation. She woke to find him standing motionless, skeletal figure silhouetted against the rising sun, staring toward the Citadel as if he could burn it down through concentration alone. The demonic motorcycle idled nearby, hellfire reduced to ember glow in daylight, patient as a loyal hound. "You meant what you said," Dog croaked, voice rough with dehydration, about attacking at sunset. "Yes, Joe's had all night to prepare. He'll have every war boy stationed on those walls, every imperator armed and ready. He controls the high ground, the choke points. The terrain doesn't matter when you can't be killed. Arrogance got a lot of good fighters buried in the sand." The rider turned his skull toward her, hellfire flickering in empty sockets. "Not arrogance, experience. I've walked through armies before. I've burned fortresses that made your Citadel look like children's toys. I've judged warlords who commanded millions, not just thousands. Immortan Joe is a petty tyrant playing God over a dying corner of one small world." But the word hung between them. The rider's skeletal fingers flexed, considering. "But I've never fought in a world where nearly everyone is guilty of something, where the line between victim and villain is painted in shades of gray instead of black and white. Your war boys are brainwashed children turned into weapons. Your imperators serve tyranny because the alternative is death. Even Immortan Joe." The rider paused, and Johnny Blaze's consciousness surged forward. He's a monster, but he was made one by this world's collapse. Pre-war records, I can sense them, fragments in the stones, show he was a military officer who tried to save people when everything fell apart, failed, broke, became something worse than what he fought. You're saying he deserves mercy? Dog's voice carried sharp edge. I'm saying I understand complexity now. Doesn't change what he's become, doesn't excuse what he's done, but it means I'll give his followers chances to abandon him before I bring the walls down. The truly guilty will burn. The coerced, the brainwashed, the desperate, they get to run. Dog stood, joints popping, body protesting the abuse of yesterday's motorcycle ride through hell. Then we need to make sure they know running is an option, because right now, most of them think dying for Joe is the only path to glory. How? She smiled, expression carrying more vindictiveness than humor. I know the Citadel's layout. I know which war boys are questioning the faith. I know imperators who hate Joe but serve because they're protecting family members he's holding hostage. Give me until noon and I'll spread word. Anyone who abandons their post before sunset gets to live. Anyone who stays burns with their false god. The Ghost Rider studied her, this woman who'd been bred like livestock, discarded when her usefulness ended, now volunteering to walk back into her prison to undermine it from within. Her soul carried complicated guilt, yes, but also courage that transcended survival instinct. He'll kill you if he discovers the betrayal. He was going to kill me anyway. Slowly, in Gastown's refineries turned into petroleum and gasoline. At least this way I choose how I die. She met the rider's eyeless gaze without flinching. Besides, you said sunset. I've got 12 hours. I'm faster than I look, and the Citadel has more hiding places than Joe knows about. His breeders built a whole secret world in the walls and crawl spaces. The rider considered. Johnny Blaze's human tactical thinking approved. Sabotage from within while he assaulted from without. Divide Joe's forces. Make war boys choose between certain death defending a tyrant and uncertain freedom following a demon. If you're not out by sunset, I'm coming in regardless. Then I better move fast. The Ghost Rider approached his motorcycle, reached into a saddlebag that hadn't existed moments before. Hell's geometry didn't obey conventional storage rules and withdrew something wrapped in cloth. He handed it to Dog. She unwrapped it carefully. A canteen, but not scavenged Wasteland refuse. This was pristine, metallic, decorated with symbols that hurt to look at directly. Infernal script that predated human language. When she unscrewed the cap, water inside gleamed impossibly pure. From a spring in hell, the rider explained. Acheron's tributary. Won't run dry no matter how much you drink. Don't let anyone else drink from it. The water judges the unworthy, and their deaths are unpleasant. Dog stared at the canteen like he'd handed her a nuclear weapon. You're giving me infinite water, in a world where water is absolute power. Use it to stay alive. Show it to people you're trying to convince. Proof that I'm not bluffing, that alternatives to Joe's monopoly exist. Don't let him capture it. Destroy it first if necessary. She secured the canteen to her belt with shaking hands. Why do you trust me? I don't, but your soul shows you'll die before betraying people who depend on you. That's close enough to trust for my purposes. Dog laughed, harsh sound, edged with hysteria and determination. You know how to motivate a girl, demon. Ghost Rider. What? That's what I'm called? Ghost Rider, not demon. The distinction matters to the man trapped inside this skull. Something shifted in Dog's expression, recognition that the monster before her contained remnants of humanity. that judgment and vengeance could coexist with mercy and strategy. All right, Ghost Rider, I'll see you at sunset. Try not to start the apocalypse before I'm clear of the blast radius. She started walking toward the Citadel, canteen at her hip, each step carrying her back toward the fortress that had broken her and that she now intended to help destroy. The Ghost Rider watched until she disappeared into heat shimmer and distance, then turned his attention to preparations. Sunset was 12 hours away. He would spend them gathering intelligence and multiplying Joe's paranoia. The Citadel's walls buzzed with activity like kicked anthill. War boys scrambled along platforms, checking weapons, reinforcing barricades, huffing chrome spray to maintain courage that felt increasingly fragile. Imperators barked orders, positioning heavy weapons at choke points, calculating firing solutions for an enemy they'd been told was functionally immortal. And in the highest chamber, throne room carved from living rock, walls decorated with steering wheels, and chrome offerings like twisted religious iconography, Immortan Joe held court. He sat in his breathing apparatus throne, tumors visible through transparent chestplate, body sustained by tubes and machinery, and sheer refusal to die. His most trusted imperators surrounded him, Rictus Erectus, his gigantic simple-minded son, the people leader, obese administrator of Gastown, the bullet farmer, ammunition-drunk warlord with bandoliers for decoration. "Tell me again," Joe wheezed through his breathing mask, voice distorted by mechanical assistance. "Exactly what your scouts reported." The lead imperator from yesterday's encounter stepped forward, saluted. "The entity calls itself Ghost Rider, skeletal figure, burning skull, rides a motorcycle that runs without fuel, regenerates from gunfire and explosives, possesses a chain weapon that cuts through vehicles like paper, claims it's coming at sunset to kill you and judge the Citadel." "Judge," Joe repeated, the word venomous. "I am the one who judges. I control the water, therefore I control life and death. I am the one who decides who lives and who dies in this wasteland, not some supernatural parlor trick." "Father," Rictus rumbled, his slow processing brain struggling with the concept. "What if it's real? What if it really is a demon from hell?" "Then we send it back to hell," Joe snapped. "We have numbers. We have position. We have faith. The war boys believe in chrome and glory. What does this Ghost Rider have? Theatrics, showmanship. I've seen magicians, Rictus. I've seen men who claimed divine powers. They all died the same way when you put enough bullets in them." The people leader leaned forward, chins wobbling. "But the reports say bullets don't stop it. Say it regenerates. Say it killed 15 vehicles worth of war boys and barely slowed down." "Then we use bigger bullets," the bullet farmer interjected, eyes gleaming with ammunition lust. "I've got pre-war artillery, 50 caliber mounted guns, RPGs salvaged from military bases. We rain fire on this thing until there's nothing left to regenerate." Joe nodded slowly. "Double the wall guards. Position heavy weapons at every approach. Rig explosives to collapse the canyon entrance if necessary. Bury it under tons of rock. And spread word among the war boys. Whoever witnesses the Demon Rider's death gets promoted to Imperator. Valhalla guaranteed." The Imperators saluted and dispersed to execute orders. But Joe noticed something, subtle hesitation in their movements, doubt flickering behind chrome-painted masks. They'd seen the reports. They knew what happened to the last war party. And doubt, once introduced, spread like cancer through belief systems. Joe keyed his intercom, voice broadcasting through every speaker in the Citadel. "Hear me, war boys. Today we face a test. A false demon who claims power over life and death. But remember, I control the water. I decide who drinks and who thirsts. I am the one who grants passage to Valhalla. This ghost rider is nothing but charlatan, a trickster trying to steal your faith. When sunset comes and it throws itself against our walls, you will witness its destruction. You will see that chrome and glory triumph over supernatural lies. And those who stand firm, those who fight without wavering, will ride eternal, shiny, and chrome. The response should have been unified roar of approval. Instead, scattered cheers mixed with uncertain silence. Some war boys responded with traditional enthusiasm. Others exchanged glances, remembering stories from survivors, hellfire that burned souls, chains that ripped engines out, a thing that couldn't die no matter what you threw at it. And in the crawl spaces between walls, moving through secret passages only the breeders knew, Dog began her work. Whispered conversations with sympathetic imperators, quiet promises to war boys who'd started questioning. The canteen produced at strategic moments, its impossible purity proving the Ghost Rider's claims about alternative water sources. He's giving you a choice, she told a cluster of younger war boys, boys who'd been stolen from settlements as children and conditioned into fanaticism. Run before sunset and he'll let you live. Find the spring northwest of the breaking wave formation. Build something better than this. Or stay, defend Joe, and burn with him. But Joe controls the water, one protested, though his voice carried doubt. Without him, we die of thirst. Dog held up the canteen, let them see its perfection. The Ghost Rider gave me this. Water from hell itself never runs dry. He knows where the clean springs are, the ones Joe's been hiding from you. He can survive without Joe's water. Can you? Seeds planted, cracks widening. The Citadel's foundation wasn't stone, it was belief, and belief was bleeding from 1,000 small wounds. By noon, 3 war boys had deserted. By mid-afternoon, 2 imperators vanished with their families. By late afternoon, whispers circulated through every level. The demon rider was real. It offered mercy to those who abandoned Joe, and sunset was coming like Judgment Day. Joe felt the erosion, ordered executions for deserters, but executing the wavering only made others waver more, and the cycle accelerated. When the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the wasteland in blood-red light, Dog emerged from the Citadel through a hidden breeder's passage. She ran toward the Ghost Rider's position, canteen bouncing at her hip, smile fierce despite exhaustion. "It's done," she gasped when she reached him. "Half the war boys are questioning. A dozen imperators ready to switch sides if you demonstrate real power. Joe's isolated in his throne room, paranoid, surrounded only by his most fanatical loyalists." The Ghost Rider stood, skeletal figure rising like death personified. The sun touched the horizon and hellfire erupted across his bones in sympathetic response to dying light. Then it's time. He mounted his motorcycle. Dog climbed behind him. The engine roared. Not mechanical sound, but the cry of damned souls given voice through infernal engineering. The Citadel waited, walls bristling with weapons, war boys clutching firearms with white-knuckled desperation, Immortan Joe in his throne room proclaiming divine invincibility. The Ghost Rider twisted the throttle. Hellfire painted the wasteland. Judgment approached on burning wheels. The Ghost Rider didn't approach the Citadel with stealth or strategy. He came like a natural disaster, visible from miles away, hellfire trail marking his path like a comet scraping atmosphere. The demonic motorcycle's roar, audible over the wasteland's constant wind. No tactics, no subterfuge, just inevitability given skeletal form and burning purpose. War boys on the outer perimeter spotted him first. Radio chatter exploded across all frequencies, panic barely concealed. beneath chrome spray bravado. "Contact! Demon Rider inbound. Half a mile in closing. All units engage," an Imperator's voice, strained. "Fire at will. Bring it down before it reaches the canyon." The outer defense line consisted of 12 hardpoints, fortified positions built from vehicle carcasses and stone, each manned by war boys with heavy weapons. As the Ghost Rider entered range, they opened fire simultaneously. Bullets filled the air like horizontal rain. Tracer rounds painted phosphorescent lines. A rocket-propelled grenade streaked toward the rider, smoke trail wobbling. Machine gun fire chewed up sand in geysers of glass and dust. The Ghost Rider rode through the barrage like he was riding through morning mist. Bullets sparked off his skull, punched through his torso, shredded leather and bone. The RPG detonated 10 feet to his left, blast wave powerful enough to crater sand and send shrapnel in lethal radius. The explosion should have dismembered him, scattered skeletal pieces across 50 yards. Instead, Hellfire absorbed the blast, converted kinetic energy into fuel for supernatural regeneration. Bones reformed instantly. Leather jacket repaired itself. The rider didn't slow, didn't swerve, just kept accelerating toward the perimeter with mechanical inevitability. A war boy in the nearest hardpoint, chrome paint running with terrified sweat, grabbed his radio. "It's not stopping. We're hitting it, but it's not stopping." "Then hit it harder." Joe's voice crackled through every speaker. "Concentrate fire. Nothing survives concentrated fire." All 12 hardpoints focused on single target. The volume of bullets increased until individual shots became continuous roar, a wall of lead that should have shredded anything biological or mechanical. Warboys fed belt after belt into smoking machine guns, barrels glowing red-hot, brass casings piling like golden snow. The Ghost Rider reached the first hardpoint at 80 miles per hour, body Swiss cheesed with bullets, regenerating as fast as damage occurred. His chain materialized mid-ride, whipped forward with supernatural velocity, wrapped around the hardpoint's support structure. One yank, and the entire fortification, 3 tons of welded metal and sandbags, ripped from its foundation. The structure flew backward, warboys tumbling from disintegrating cover, screaming as their protection became projectile. It crashed into the second hardpoint, both positions collapsing into twisted metal chaos. The rider released his chain, let momentum carry the wreckage away, and turned toward the third hardpoint. The warboys there had stopped firing, staring with weapons lowered, chrome spray courage evaporating under the weight of impossibility. "Run," the Ghost Rider commanded, voice amplified by hellfire until it echoed across the wasteland. "Final warning. Abandon your posts. Abandon Joe, or burn." 3 warboys dropped their weapons and ran. 2 others raised rifles with shaking hands, loyalty overriding survival instinct. The rider's chain lashed out, not at the warboys, but at their fortifications' ammunition stockpile. Hellfire-wrapped links struck the crates, and several hundred rounds of ammunition detonated simultaneously. The explosion vaporized the hardpoint, flash-burned the loyal warboys to shadows on sand, sent a mushroom cloud of smoke into the evening sky. The concussion rattled windows in the Citadel proper, 2 miles away. The remaining 9 hardpoints watched that explosion, calculated their odds, and made individual choices. 4 positions evacuated entirely, warboys fleeing into Wasteland without looking back. 3 held position, firing sporadic shots more from duty than belief. 2 actually intensified fire, warboys screaming chrome dream prayers while emptying magazines. The Ghost Rider ignored the evacuated positions, rode past the half-hearted resistance, and focused on the true believers. His approach was methodical, almost gentle in its violence. He gave each position 10 seconds to cease fire and abandon post. Those who took the offer lived. Those who didn't experienced hellfire in all its soul-burning glory. By the time he reached the canyon entrance, the citadel's natural choke point narrowed to 20 yards of defensible terrain. The outer perimeter had been reduced to burning wreckage and scattered survivors running for their lives. The canyon entrance presented more serious opposition. Immortan Joe had concentrated his best fighters here, 20 Imperators in full chrome armor, 40 war boys who'd proven themselves through countless raids, and weapons that made the outer perimeter look like children with slingshots. 2 50-caliber mounted guns, pre-war military salvage, positioned on rock ledges with overlapping fields of fire. RPG teams with dozen missiles between them. Improvised napalm barrels rigged to pour burning petroleum through kill zones. And at the canyon's narrowest point, charges buried in the walls. Enough explosives to collapse the entrance and bury anything in the passage under tons of rock. The lead Imperator, same woman from yesterday's encounter, burned scars vivid on her face, stood on the firing platform with a radio in hand. "Ghost Rider," she called, voice amplified by loudspeaker, "last chance. Turn around. Joe's willing to negotiate. You want water sources. We'll trade information. You want safe passage? We'll provide escort. Just turn around and nobody else dies." The Ghost Rider stopped his motorcycle 50 yards from the canyon entrance. Dismounted. Dog slid off, moved to relative cover behind a boulder formation. When the rider spoke, his voice carried no amplification, yet somehow filled the canyon with resonance that made stone vibrate. "I gave warning. Sunset for surrender. Time's expired. Tell Joe. Judgment is here." The Imperator's jaw tightened. She'd hoped the demon was bluffing, that self-preservation would triumph over vendetta. She should have known better. Things that walked through RPG blasts didn't understand self-preservation. "Fire," she ordered, voice flat. "Everything we've got." The canyon became Hell's Mouth. Both 50-caliber guns opened up, their heavy rounds capable of punching through vehicle engines, each bullet carrying a half-inch of armor-piercing fury. RPG teams fired in sequence, staggered shots to ensure constant bombardment. The napalm barrels tipped, pouring rivers of burning petroleum down channeled grooves, designed to fill the kill zone with liquid fire. The Ghost Rider walked forward through all of it. Heavy rounds tore through his skull, shattered his spine, pulped his ribcage. Each impact would have killed a normal human instantly, but the rider wasn't normal or human. Bones reformed between bullets, hellfire cauterizing faster than blood could spill. Not that he had blood in traditional sense. An RPG struck him center mass, detonated on impact. Blast wave powerful enough to crater the ground. The rider's skeletal form disintegrated in the explosion. Skull fragmented, spine separated into vertebrae, limbs scattered across 10 yards. The war boys howled victory. The Imperators held fire, watching smoke clear, confirming the kill. Then the scattered bones began moving, drawn together by hellfire magnetism, vertebrae stacking, skull fragments reassembling, limbs reattaching with sounds like breaking ice reversed. In 10 seconds, the Ghost Rider stood whole again, reconstituted from scattered components, not even slowed by his temporary disassembly. "Throne of Joe," someone whispered, horror overwhelming vocabulary. The napalm reached him, burning petroleum flowing around skeletal feet, climbing up leather jacket, attempting to consume. But hellfire didn't fear conventional flame. It was the original, the template from which all earthly fire descended. The napalm burned out harmlessly against supernatural immunity, leaving the rider untouched and still advancing. "The charges!" the Imperator screamed. "Collapse the canyon, bury it!" A war boy triggered the detonator. Charges buried in canyon walls exploded in sequence, precisely calculated to bring down tons of rock in controlled collapse. The canyon's ceiling cracked, massive stone slabs separating from walls, gravity taking over with geological inevitability. The Ghost Rider looked up at falling ceiling with what might have been amusement if skulls could express emotion. His chain whipped upward, hellfire-wrapped links striking the largest falling slab, 10 tons of solid rock, plummeting with terminal velocity. The chain wrapped around the stone. The rider pulled. Physics protested. Momentum screamed objection. Gravity filed formal complaint. The spirit of vengeance ignored all three. The 10-ton slab's descent arrested mid-fall, hung suspended by hellfire chain for 2 impossible seconds, then redirected, not falling but thrown. The massive stone sailed through the air like skipped pebble, arced over the Ghost Rider's skull, and crashed into the canyon's defensive position. Imperators and war boys scattered, but not fast enough. The stone struck firing platforms, crushed mounted guns, buried war boys beneath tonnage that turned bodies into abstract art. The impact shook the entire canyon, sent cracks spiderwebbing through walls, dislodged more rocks in uncontrolled cascade. When dust settled, the defensive position had been reduced to rubble and screaming wounded. Half the defenders were dead, crushed beneath the very trap they'd sprung. The survivors stared at the Ghost Rider with expressions that transcended fear into existential terror. They'd just watched something catch falling ceiling and use it as weapon. "I offered mercy," the rider said, walking forward through smoke and dust. "I gave warning, I provided choice. Those who ran are alive. Those who stayed..." Hellfire erupted across his skeletal frame for emphasis. "Face judgment." The lead Imperator, pinned beneath debris with both legs crushed, still clutched her radio. Blood ran from her mouth, internal injuries catastrophic, but she managed to key the transmitter. "Joe, it's through. The canyon defenses are gone. It's coming for you." Static. Then Immortan Joe's voice, smaller somehow, breathing apparatus wheeze more pronounced. "Fall back to inner walls. All remaining forces converge on throne room. We end this where I sit, where I rule." The Imperator dropped the radio, looked at the Ghost Rider approaching through fire and falling stone. "Do it," she said, voice surprisingly calm. "The penance stare. Show me what I've done. Show me every sin." The rider crouched beside her, studied her soul. "War crimes." "Absolutely. Murders in Joe's name. Dozens. But also protection of breeders when she could get away with it. Water smuggled to the wretched. Orders disobeyed when they crossed lines even she wouldn't cross." "You're guilty," the rider confirmed, "but not enough to burn forever. Just enough." He placed skeletal fingers on her forehead. Not the full penance stare that would have shattered her mind, just a glimpse, flash of the pain she'd caused, the lives ended, the suffering inflicted, 5 seconds of experiencing her victim's final moments. She screamed, then fell silent, tears cutting tracks through dust on her face. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry. I was just surviving, just following orders. I didn't think about..." "They all say that," the rider interrupted. "The guilty always have reasons. But now you know, reasons don't erase the pain. Remember this, if you survive your injuries, do better." He stood, left her pinned and weeping, continued toward the citadel proper. Behind him, the survivors of the canyon battle made their choices. Some fled, finally understanding that chrome and glory were hollow concepts against genuine damnation. Others, too conditioned or too stubborn, staggered after him toward final confrontation. Dog emerged from cover, followed the Ghost Rider at careful distance. The inner citadel loomed ahead, carved from living rock. Water towers at its crown like blasphemous temples. Immortan Joe, waiting in his throne room with his most fanatical followers. The Ghost Rider had promised judgment at sunset. The sun was setting, painting everything in blood-red light that matched the hellfire-wreathing skeletal bones. Time for the false god to face a real demon. The Citadel's inner sanctum was a vertical maze, platforms connected by chains and pulleys, elevators ascending through carved stone channels, defensive positions layered like wedding cake tiers of violence. Immortan Joe had retreated to the highest level, surrounded by his most loyal. Rictus Erectus, the people leader, the bullet farmer, and maybe 40 war boys, whose faith in Chrome and Valhalla burned too bright to extinguish. The Ghost Rider entered through the main gate, which hung open like slack jaw. No resistance met him. The Imperators who'd survived the canyon had either fled or were too wounded to fight. War boys watched from platforms above, weapons lowered, torn between duty and terror. Immortan Joe! The rider's voice shook the stone, echoed through every chamber and corridor. Your judgment has arrived, silence answered. Then, through the speaker system, Joe's wheezing voice. You want me, demon? Come and take me, but you'll wade through my faithful first. Every level is defended. Every platform is a killing ground. You may not die, but you'll suffer for every step you take toward my throne. I've suffered before, the rider replied. Hell is built from suffering. Yours will be worse. He began his ascent. The first platform was defended by a dozen war boys with crude weapons, spears, chains, improvised clubs. They charged with chrome spray courage, screaming about Valhalla and glory, crashing into the rider like suicidal wave against demonic shore. The Ghost Rider didn't use his chain, didn't use hellfire, just skeletal fists and supernatural strength, teaching these fanatics the difference between battle and execution. A spear thrust at his skull. He caught the shaft mid-strike, pulled the wielder close, stared into chrome-painted eyes. How old are you? 18 winters, the war boy gasped, struggling. Old enough to die gloriously. Old enough to live properly, the rider corrected. He threw the boy, not violently, just firmly, toward the platform's edge. The war boy tumbled over, fell 15 feet into sand cushion below, injured but alive. Find a different purpose. The others watched their brother fall and live. Confusion rippled through chrome spray certainty. They'd been taught that the rider killed everything, showed no mercy. Yet here he was, throwing opponents to safety rather than death. Two more charged. The rider caught both, one in each hand, lifted them effortlessly and tossed them after their brother. I judge the guilty, not the manipulated. Joe made you into weapons. Choose not to be. A war boy in the back, maybe 20, lowered his club. If we stop fighting, you'll let us live? Yes. But Joe said you'd damn our souls, said you'd. Joe lied about everything else. Why believe him about me? The war boy dropped his weapon, stepped back. One by one, the others followed. Chrome spray courage evaporating under the weight of demonstrated mercy. They retreated to the platform's edges, cleared a path, let the rider pass. As he walked through their ranks toward the next level, one war boy whispered, "Witness." But not in the traditional sense, in a new one redefined by watching something simultaneously terrifying and merciful. The second platform held different opposition. The people leader, obese administrator of Gastown, wielding a flamethrower jury-rigged from welding equipment and petroleum tanks. His chins wobbled with fury as he spotted the rider ascending. "You're destroying everything!" he screamed, voice high-pitched and panicked. "The economy, The fuel distribution. The whole system depends on Joe's authority. Without him, it all collapses into chaos. It's already chaos, the rider replied, still ascending. Just organized chaos that serves your interests. Better organized than anarchic. The people eater triggered his flamethrower. Liquid fire vomited across the platform, 15-foot stream of burning petroleum designed to incinerate anything biological. The Ghost Rider walked through the flames like they were morning mist. Hellfire didn't fear petroleum fire. It was the superior flame, the original damnation. The People Eater's weapon washed over skeletal form and did exactly nothing except waste fuel. Impossible, the People Eater whispered, squeezing the trigger harder, as if volume would succeed where chemistry failed. Impossible. The rider reached him, gently, almost tenderly, removed the flamethrower from shaking hands, set it aside, then placed skeletal fingers on the administrator's forehead. Penance, the rider said quietly. The People Eater's screams echoed through the citadel. Every life spent securing fuel monopoly. Every settlement starved of gasoline until they submitted. Every independent refiner executed to maintain Gastown's dominance. His victims' pain flooded through his consciousness. Hundreds of deaths, thousands of lives ruined, all for petroleum profit margins. When the rider released him, the People Eater collapsed, weeping uncontrollably, fingers clawing at his own face as if he could scratch away the guilt burned into his neurons. You'll live, the rider said, but you'll remember, every day, every night. What you've done weighs on you now, as it should have all along. He continued upward, leaving the People Eater broken but breathing. The third platform, the Bullet Farmer, draped in ammunition bandoliers like religious vestments, wielding dual machine guns with the fervor of ammunition-drunk zealotry. His eyes gleamed with the particular madness of those who worship violence for its own sake. Finally, he roared, opening fire with both weapons. A target worthy of my ammunition. Twin streams of bullets chewed through the air, hundreds of rounds expended in seconds. The Bullet Farmer laughed maniacally as he fired, reloading without pause, burning through ammunition reserves that represented months of salvage and production. The Ghost Rider advanced through the barrage, bodies shredding and regenerating in continuous cycle, bones fragmenting and reforming, leather jacket torn and repaired, the physical damage meaningless against supernatural resilience. More bullets, the Bullet Farmer screamed to his assistants, war boys scrambling to feed fresh belts into smoking weapons. More, everything we have. But bullets, no matter the volume, couldn't stop something already dead. The rider reached the Bullet Farmer mid-reload, grasped both machine guns, and crushed their barrels like aluminum cans. Metal shrieked and compacted, weapons reduced to scrap in skeletal grip. No, the Bullet Farmer whimpered, staring at his ruined weapons like parent whose children had been killed. No. The rider's chain materialized, wrapped around ammunition bandoliers, yanked all of them free in one smooth motion. Thousands of rounds scattered across the platform, bouncing and rolling, utterly useless without weapons to fire them. You worshipped bullets, the rider said, treated ammunition like divinity. But bullets are just metal, tools. They don't grant meaning or purpose. He leaned close, hellfire illuminating the Bullet Farmer's terrified face. Find something else to worship, or next time I'll show you what it feels like to be shot. Every single round. He left the Bullet Farmer on his knees, surrounded by useless ammunition, faith shattered by demonstration that violence had limits and gods of gunpowder were just men with guns. The fourth platform, Rictus Erectus, Immortan Joe's gigantic simple-minded son, standing 8 feet tall with muscle-bound frame and child's comprehension. He held a massive club, engine block welded to steel rod, weapon that could pulverize skulls with single swing. "Father says you're bad," Rictus rumbled, voice slow and confused. "Says you want to hurt him, but you keep letting people live. Bad things kill people. You're not killing people." The Ghost Rider stopped, studied this complication. Rictus was guilty by association and participation. Yes, had crushed dozens of people under orders, enforced Joe's tyranny through brute strength. But his soul showed limited comprehension, diminished capacity, manipulation by a father who'd used his son as weapon, while offering minimal explanation or choice. "Your father lied to you," the rider said carefully. "He told you that hoarding water was protecting people. But he's killing them slowly through thirst and desperation. Do you understand?" Rictus's brow furrowed with massive effort. "People die from no water?" "Yes. Father has water, lots of water in big tanks." Rictus gestured toward the towers above. "If people dying, why not share?" "Because your father wants power more than he wants to help people." Rictus processed this slowly, each thought visible in his expressions like reading subtitles. That's bad. Father taught me not to be bad. Said bad people go to hell." His eyes widened. "Are you from hell?" "Yes." "Are you here for Father?" "Yes." Rictus looked at his club, looked at his father's throne room above, looked back at the Ghost Rider. The decision playing across his face was like watching tectonic plates shift, enormous forces moving slowly but inevitably. "Okay," he said finally. He set down his club, massive weapon clanging against stone. "Father was bad. You take him to hell. Is right." Then, quieter, "Am I bad too? Will you take me?" The rider examined Rictus's soul. Violence committed, yes, but under direction and limited understanding. Guilt contaminated by mental limitation and parental manipulation. Not innocent, but not deserving damnation either. "No," the rider said. "You were used. That's different from choosing evil. When this is over, help people. Share the water your father hoarded. That's how you avoid hell." Rictus nodded slowly, relief visible in his simple features. He stepped aside, cleared the path upward. "Okay, I help people. Share water. Be good." The Ghost Rider ascended the final platform toward Immortan Joe's throne room. Behind him, the Citadel's defenses had crumbled not through overwhelming violence, but through selective mercy and demonstrated truth. War boys abandoned posts, imperators fled. Even Joe's inner circle had been dismantled through judgment that distinguished between architects of tyranny and their tools. Only one person remained to face the rider's full, untempered wrath. The throne room doors were chrome-plated steel decorated with steering wheels and religious iconography of the Fury Road. They hung slightly open, inviting. Through the gap, the Ghost Rider could see Immortan Joe on his breathing apparatus throne, surrounded by his 20 most fanatical war boys, the true believers who'd rather die than abandon their god. The rider pushed the doors fully open with skeletal hands, stepped into the throne room like judgment personified. Joe sat surrounded by his final defenders, tumors visible through transparent chest plate, breathing apparatus wheezing with mechanical rhythm, but his eyes, shrewd, calculating, absolutely certain of his own rightness, met the rider's burning gaze without flinching. "So," Joe wheezed, "the demon finally arrives. Tell me, after you kill me, what then? You've destroyed my lieutenants, scattered my war boys, undermined everything I built. The Wasteland will descend into tribal warfare. Thousands will die fighting over these water towers. Was that your goal?" Replace organized tyranny with chaotic bloodbath? The Ghost Rider approached slowly, deliberately. I don't care about your systems or successors. I care about judgment. You hoarded water while people died of thirst, bred women like livestock, turned children into disposable soldiers, played God over desperate survivors and called it divine right. I brought order, Joe roared, voice amplified by speakers until it filled the chamber. When the world collapsed, I created structure, purpose. Without me, they're just animals fighting over scraps. Then they'll be animals who choose their own fate, the rider replied. Better than livestock who worship their butcher. Joe raised one hand. His 20 war boys moved as one. Chrome-painted fanatics charging with religious fervor, weapons raised, the chain moved with serpent speed and surgical precision, hellfire trailing like liquid flame. It wrapped around weapons, not bodies. Was their Valhalla guns from hands, yanked spears from grips against sent clubs tumbling into corners. The Ghost Rider's chain war boys found themselves suddenly disarmed, standing before the Ghost Rider with nothing but chrome paint and pharmaceutical courage. Last chance, the rider said, voice carrying absolute finality. Walk away. Your God can't save you. I'm giving you what he never did. Choice. 10 war boys broke. The weight of everything they'd witnessed. The canyon collapse, the people eater's breakdown, Rictus's abandonment, finally crushed through conditioned loyalty. They fled, stumbling over each other toward the doors, chrome paint running with panicked sweat. 10 remained. These were the true believers, the ones so deeply programmed that even demonstration of Joe's mortality couldn't shake their faith. They charged bare-handed, willing to die for their God with fingernails and teeth if necessary. The Ghost Rider didn't want to kill them, but the spirit of vengeance understood. Some people couldn't be saved from themselves. His skeletal fists moved with hellfire-enhanced speed. Each strike was precisely calculated, not to kill, but to incapacitate. Shattered kneecaps, dislocated shoulders, broken ribs that would heal but would hurt for weeks. The war boys fell one by one, chrome-painted bodies crumpling, screaming not from physical pain, but from the psychological agony of watching their God do nothing while they bled for him. Within 30 seconds, all 10 lay groaning on the floor, alive, broken. Witnessing the reality that Immortan Joe commanded from his throne, watching his most faithful get destroyed, and did absolutely nothing to help them. You see, the Ghost Rider addressed the fallen war boys without taking his burning gaze off Joe. Your God lets you suffer, lets you die, uses you like ammunition, fired once and discarded. That's not divinity, that's just cruelty with better marketing. Immortan Joe remained seated, breathing apparatus wheezing steadily, eyes calculating behind transparent mask. His hand rested on a dead man's switch, crude detonator connected to charges throughout the Citadel. One move, he wheezed, and I collapse this entire structure. Bury both of us, everyone still inside, under tons of rock. Mutually assured destruction. You'll die regardless, the rider said, advancing slowly. Question is whether you take others with you. Why not? If I'm going to hell anyway, might as well bring company. Joe's finger tensed on the switch. Stay back, demon. I spent 50 years building this empire. If I can't rule it, no one will. The Ghost Rider stopped. Not from fear, bombs couldn't permanently harm him. But Dog was still in the Citadel somewhere. So were the war boys who'd surrendered, the imperators who'd fled to lower levels, the wretched masses huddled in their hovels. Joe's final spite would kill hundreds of innocents. Johnny Blaze's consciousness surged forward, desperation lending him strength to surface through the spirit's control. The rider's voice shifted, still demonic resonance, but underneath it, human pleading. Joe, Immortan Joe, listen to me, not as a demon, but as someone who understands what you've become. I can see your soul. I know what you were before the world ended. Joe's eyes narrowed. You know nothing. Colonel Joseph Moore, 101st Airborne, decorated veteran. When the bombs fell, you were at Peterson Air Force Base, tried to maintain order while civilization collapsed. You watched good people become monsters, watched society tear itself apart. You tried to save them, and they crucified you for it, literally, didn't they? The base survivors, when supplies ran low, they blamed you for rationing, nailed you to vehicle frames, and left you to die. Joe's breathing quickened, apparatus wheezing faster. How do you... I see souls, Joe. Yours carries every scar. You survived the crucifixion, crawled away, found this canyon and its aquifer. And you decided, if humanity was just animals in crisis, you'd be the one who controlled the watering hole. You'd never be victim again. You'd be the god who decided who lived and died. They deserved it, Joe roared, half rising from his throne. I tried to help them, tried to organize, ration fairly, save everyone, and they tortured me for it. So yes, I became what they made me. Better to rule through fear than die showing mercy. The Ghost Rider reached the throne's base, looked up at the tumor-ridden tyrant. You're not wrong about what they did to you. You're not wrong that the Wasteland is brutal, but you became the monster you hated, repeated the cycle, turned yourself into the tyrant you swore you'd never become. At least I'm alive, Joe spat. At least I survived. At least you're not alive. You're a corpse sustained by machines and spite, playing God over people too desperate to resist. That's not living. That's just refusing to die. Joe's finger trembled on the dead man's switch. For the first time, doubt flickered behind his eyes. Not about his actions, but about their purpose. Had it all been survival or just revenge stretched across decades? What would you have me do? He whispered. Surrender? Beg forgiveness from people who wanted me dead? Accept judgment from a demon who understands nothing about what it takes to survive when everything collapses? No, the rider said quietly. I want you to feel what they felt. Every person who died of thirst while you bathed in excess, every child bred and discarded, every war boy conditioned into disposable soldier, every innocent crushed under your empire. I want you to experience it all, every single one. Joe understood, the penance stare. He'd heard the stories from survivors, how it forced you to experience your victim's suffering, how it broke minds and stopped hearts. If you do that, Joe said, finger still on the trigger, my hand spasms, the charges blow, everyone dies. Stalemate. The Ghost Rider could survive the collapse. Joe couldn't. But hundreds of others would be buried, and the spirit of vengeance, corrupted by Johnny Blaze's humanity, contaminated by this world's moral complexity, couldn't accept that collateral damage. Then Dog's voice echoed from the doorway. The charges are disarmed. Both Ryder and Joe turned. Dog stood there, hands bloody, holding bundle of wires and detonators she'd cut from their connections. Behind her, several freed breeders and sympathetic mechanics who'd spent the last hour crawling through the Citadel's infrastructure, severing Joe's doomsday weapon, one connection at a time. You're not taking anyone else with you, Joe, Dog continued, walking into the throne room with the confidence of someone who'd already died 1,000 times in her mind and found it didn't scare her anymore. You die alone, just you and your sins. Joe stared at the dead man's switch in his hand, now utterly useless, connected to nothing, just piece of scrap metal and psychological warfare, his final threat, his last leverage, gone. No, he whispered, then louder, no, this is my citadel, my empire, my... The Ghost Rider's skeletal hand shot forward, grasped Joe's face, burning fingers closing around tumor-ridden skull. Eye sockets erupted with hellfire, not simple flame but concentrated judgment, the penance stare at full, untempered intensity. Immortan Joe screamed. Every person who died of thirst flooded his consciousness, thousands of them, throats cracked and bleeding, tongues swollen, bodies withering while he sat in his throne room surrounded by water. He felt their deaths simultaneously, each one distinct and excruciating. Every breeder he'd used and discarded, the pregnancies, the forced births, the children taken away, the disposal when they stopped producing viable offspring. He experienced their trauma, their hopelessness, their slow degradation from human to livestock. Every war boy conditioned from childhood, stolen from settlements, brainwashed through isolation and chemical manipulation, turned into disposable soldiers who died believing their slavery was glory. He felt their confusion, their fear, their desperate need to believe the lies because the truth was too horrible. Every execution he'd ordered, every family separated, every innocent crushed under his wheels, every small cruelty accumulated into mountain of suffering that crashed through his consciousness like tsunami of guilt. Joe's body convulsed. His breathing apparatus screamed, unable to keep pace with his body's panic response. Tumors throbbed, pulse hammering through diseased flesh. His heart, already weak, already strained, struggled under the weight of empathy it had never developed naturally. The Ghost Rider held him there, forced him to experience not hours or days, but all of it, decades of suffering compressed into eternal minutes. Joe's mind shattered under the weight, personality dissolved, identity fragmented. He was no longer Immortan Joe, false god of the Wasteland. He was just Colonel Joseph Moore, experiencing the full consequence of what he'd become. His heart stopped first, cardiac arrest from shock and empathy overload. The breathing apparatus tried to compensate, pumping oxygen into lungs that no longer distributed it. Alarms shrieked from his medical harness. The Ghost Rider held him for 5 more seconds, ensuring Joe's dying consciousness experienced everything, then released him. Immortan Joe collapsed forward in his throne, dead, eyes open and staring, expression frozen in absolute horror. The breathing apparatus continued pumping for another 30 seconds, mechanical loyalty outlasting biological, then fell silent with final wheeze. The throne room fell absolutely quiet. The war boys on the floor stopped groaning. Dog and her companion stood frozen in the doorway. Even the Ghost Rider remained motionless, skeletal hand still extended, hellfire dimming to low ember glow. Outside, throughout the citadel, word spread instantly. War boys monitoring communications, imperators watching from hidden positions, the wretched masses huddled in lower levels. Everyone knew simultaneously that Immortan Joe was dead. The false god had fallen. The Ghost Rider turned toward the throne room's balcony, massive opening that overlooked the Citadel's main plaza, where thousands of wretched survivors waited for water rations that never came. He walked to the edge, stood silhouetted against the dying sun, hellfire painting him in orange and shadow. Below, faces turned upward. Thousands of them, desperate and confused, watching the burning skull appear where their god-tyrant used to stand. Immortan Joe is dead, the rider's voice carried across the entire citadel, amplified by hellfire until stone itself seemed to speak. His tyranny ends, the water is yours, take it, share it, build something better than what he created. Silence. Then someone in the crowd screamed, not fear, but release. Years of oppression given voice. The sound spread like wildfire, thousands of throats opening simultaneously, roaring their freedom into the wasteland night. People surged toward the water towers, not fighting. Dog and the freed breeders had already coordinated with sympathetic mechanics to open the valves, to let water flow freely for the first time in decades. Clear, precious liquid poured down channels into the plaza, and people wept as they drank, some collapsing from the emotional weight as much as from dehydration relief. The Ghost Rider watched them for a long moment, then turned back into the throne room where Dog stood beside Joe's corpse. "Is it over?" she asked quietly. "The tyrant's dead," the rider replied. "But the work's just beginning. They'll need to organize, defend this place from raiders who'll try to seize control. Establish fair water distribution. Without Joe's iron fist, chaos is real possibility." "Then we'll figure it out," Dog said firmly. "We've been slaves. We know what tyranny looks like. We'll build something different, even if it's messy, even if it's imperfect, at least it'll be ours." The rider nodded slowly. Johnny Blaze's consciousness surfaced fully for a moment, proud of what they'd accomplished. Hopeful for these survivors. Then the spirit reasserted control, reminded him this was vengeance, not nation building. They judged the guilty. The rest was up to the living. "There are other tyrants in this wasteland," the rider said. "Gastown, the Bullet Farm, warlords controlling other resources. They'll hear about Joe's fall. Some will see opportunity, others will see threat." Dog smiled, expression carrying more steel than warmth. "Let them come. We've got water, we've got people who know how to fight, and now we've got something they don't. Hope. Plus," she gestured at the Ghost Rider, "we've got a demon who judges tyrants. Word will spread." The Ghost Rider turned toward the throne room doors. The fallen war boys were being tended by the breeders, their injuries treated, their chrome paint washed away, their conditioning beginning its long process of unraveling. "I won't stay," the rider said. "This isn't my world. I don't belong here. Will you try to find a way home?" "Eventually. But first..." Hellfire flared across skeletal bones. "There are other guilty souls in this wasteland. Other tyrants who need judgment, Gastown's administrator, the Bullet Farm's warlords, raiders who prey on the weak. I'll find them. I'll judge them. And maybe, by the time I'm done, this world will be a little less hell and a little more survivable." Dog approached, stood before the burning skull without flinching. "Thank you for giving us a chance, for not judging us all equally guilty." "This world taught me something," the rider admitted. "That vengeance without wisdom is just violence. That judgment requires understanding context, not just cataloging sins. I came here thinking in black and white. You showed me gray exists, and sometimes gray deserves mercy." He walked toward the balcony again, looked out at the citadel transforming, water flowing freely, people helping each other, war boys removing their chrome paint and joining the wretched as equals rather than enforcers. The sun had fully set. The wasteland stretched dark and dangerous beyond the citadel's walls. And somewhere out there, other tyrants ruled, other innocents suffered, other guilty souls waited for judgment they didn't know was coming. The Ghost Rider mounted his demonic motorcycle, which had somehow found its way to the throne room, always present when needed. Hellfire erupted across its frame, engine growling its infernal readiness. "Where will you go?" Dog called. "Gastown. The people eater lived, but he won't be managing anything for a while. There'll be a power vacuum. Someone will try to fill it. I'll make sure whoever does knows what happens to tyrants in this wasteland now." He twisted the throttle. The motorcycle roared. Then one last glance back at Dog. "Survive, build, be better than what came before. That's how you honor what happened here." "We will," she promised. "Witness." The Ghost Rider paused, then slowly nodded. "Witness." The motorcycle launched from the balcony, impossibly sailing through air, landing on the Citadel's lower levels, racing down ramps and platforms toward the wasteland beyond. War boys watched him pass, some saluting, others just staring in awe at the demon who'd freed them by destroying their god. By the time the Ghost Rider reached the open wasteland, night had fully fallen. Stars blazed overhead, unpolluted by civilization's lights, brilliant and cold and indifferent. The rider accelerated into darkness, hellfire trail visible for miles, announcing his presence to anyone watching. Let them see, let them know. The wasteland had a new legend now, one that didn't promise glory or chrome or Valhalla, just judgment, merciless for the guilty, merciful for the coerced, always coming on burning wheels for those who preyed on the desperate. Behind him, the Citadel blazed with light and life. Ahead, Gastown's refineries smoked on the horizon, and beyond that, the bullet farm's ammunition forges, and beyond that, countless small tyrannies waiting to learn what happened when you built empires on suffering. The Ghost Rider rode into the wasteland's heart, and the desert would never be the same. 3 weeks passed like fever dreams in the wasteland's merciless theater. The Ghost Rider had become myth, given flesh and hellfire, a burning skull that appeared wherever tyrants gathered, wherever the strong preyed on the weak, wherever water and fuel were hoarded, while innocents died. His motorcycle's roar preceded him like thunder before lightning, giving the guilty just enough warning to feel fear before judgment arrived. Gastown fell first. The facility's new administrator, opportunist who'd seized control after the People Eater's breakdown, lasted 4 days before the rider found him. The man had immediately reinstated Joe's policies. Fuel rationed to consolidate power. Dissidents thrown into refineries alive as examples. Workers treated as disposable as the petroleum they processed. The rider gave him the penitent stare at the refinery's highest tower. Let every worker witness their oppressor experience the suffering he'd inflicted, then left him alive, broken, weeping, begging forgiveness from people who spat at his feet. The workers dismantled the hierarchical structure within hours, established cooperative management, sent emissaries to the Citadel to coordinate fair fuel distribution. The bullet farm proved more complicated. Its warlord, the original bullet farmer's lieutenant, more pragmatic and less ammunition drunk, met the rider at the facility's gates with white flag. "I've heard the stories," the lieutenant said, standing alone and unarmed. "Joe dead, Gastown liberated. You're remaking the wasteland through terror and mercy. I'm a businessman demon. What's your price for leaving us operational?" "Fair trade," the rider replied. "Ammunition distributed based on need, not profit. No exploitation of desperate settlements. Workers treated as humans, not production units. And 1/3 of output goes to Citadel's defense, free as reparation for decades of war profiteering." The lieutenant calculated odds of fighting versus complying, remembered stories of hellfire and chains, of judgment that couldn't be killed or escaped. Deal, but if settlements abuse the ammunition supply, start wars, then I'll judge them too. I'm not building utopia, just enforcing consequences for cruelty. The bullet farm's transformation was bloodless, purely transactional. 2 pragmatists negotiating new world order over the corpse of the old one. But the wasteland's smaller tyrants proved less reasonable. A warlord controlling a desert spring, demanding women as tribute for water access. The rider burned him and his lieutenants, freed the captives, showed them how to defend the spring themselves. A raider gang ambushing supply convoys, hunted down across 200 miles, each member given choice between abandoning violence or facing the penance stare. Half chose correctly, a settlement elder who'd been secretly poisoning rival communities' wells, exposed, judged, left alive but broken while his victims decided his ultimate fate. Each judgment refined the writer's understanding of Wasteland morality. Each encounter taught Johnny Blaze's consciousness how to balance vengeance with wisdom, how to judge without becoming the tyrant he'd destroyed. But the spirit of vengeance, corrupted by complexity and contaminated by mercy, began feeling something it had never experienced in millennia of existence: satisfaction in creation rather than just destruction. They weren't simply punishing the guilty anymore. They were building foundation for something better. Tonight, the Ghost Rider returned to the Citadel for the first time since Joe's death. Not for judgment, for observation. The fortress had transformed. Water flowed freely through channels redesigned for distribution rather than control. The breeding pens had been demolished, replaced with communal gardens using pre-war hydroponics and wasteland ingenuity. War boys, those who'd stayed, had removed their chrome paint permanently, retrained as defenders against raiders rather than enforcers of tyranny. The wretched weren't wretched anymore, just survivors building something resembling civilization from desperation's raw materials. Dog met him at the gates, no longer skeletal with dehydration, face fuller, eyes carrying exhaustion but also purpose. You came back, wasn't sure you would. Wanted to see if it worked, if mercy was correct choice. She gestured at the Citadel's transformation, people working together, children playing near water channels without fear, former imperators teaching defensive tactics to volunteers. It's messy. We argue constantly. 3 factions want different governance structures, and last week we almost had a fight over water allocation priorities, but nobody's being enslaved, nobody's dying of thirst, and we're building something that might actually last beyond the next warlord with biggest guns. The rider's skull tracked across the scene. Supernatural senses reading souls. Guilt still present. Everyone here had done terrible things to survive, but contaminated by genuine effort to do better. Context and complexity, the Wasteland's constant currency, visible in every interaction. Gastown and Bullet Farm are cooperating? He asked. Reluctantly, but yes. Fuel and ammunition flowing to settlements who need it, not just those who can pay Joe's prices. Trade routes establishing. We're even talking about... She hesitated, as if saying it might jinx the possibility. About trying to reclaim some agricultural land. Long-term sustainability instead of just scavenging pre-war supplies until they run out. Resistance from raiders? Constant, but word spread about you. Most raiders now know. Prey on the desperate and the Ghost Rider comes. Some gave up raiding entirely. Others moved operations far from here, hoping distance protects them. Her smile turned sharp. Spoiler, it doesn't. The rider had indeed traveled far, 500 miles in various directions, hunting the worst offenders, leaving burning motorcycle tracks and traumatized tyrants across the wasteland. His reputation preceded him now, and some settlements reported raiders abandoning attacks mid-assault after recognizing the distant sound of his motorcycle's hellfire roar. The war boys who stayed, the rider said, how are they adapting? Slowly, deprogramming doesn't happen overnight. Some still wake up expecting chrome spray and glory, but they're learning. The younger ones especially. They're finding purpose in protection instead of oppression. A few even asked about... She paused, clearly uncomfortable with the next part. About redemption, whether their sins can be forgiven. The Ghost Rider was quiet for a long moment. Johnny Blaze's consciousness wrestled with theology, the spirit of vengeance rarely considered. Forgiveness isn't mine to grant. I judge, I punish, I ensure consequences. But redemption? He looked at Dog specifically. That's between them and the people they've hurt, and between them and whatever God they believe in, if any gods listening in this wasteland. You sound different, Dog observed. Less demonic, more human. This world changed me, or maybe revealed what was always there, buried beneath vengeance's absolutes. The man I was, Johnny Blaze, human, flawed. He's been surfacing more since arriving here. The spirit doesn't like it, but even supernatural entities can learn. Movement from the Citadel's main platform, a figure approaching, massive and unmistakable. Rictus Erectus no longer playing enforcer, now helping coordinate water distribution with the patience of someone who'd found purpose beyond violence. "Demon!" Rictus called, waving enthusiastically. "You came back. I've been good, helping people, sharing water, no more crushing skulls." He paused, reconsidering. Well, crushed some skulls when raiders attacked last week, but only bad raiders, ones who wouldn't leave when warned. The Ghost Rider acknowledged him with slight nod. "You're doing well, Rictus. Your father would be—" He stopped, reconsidered. "Your father was wrong about many things, but he'd be surprised by what you've become." Rictus beamed, simple pride lighting his features. Then he noticed something, pointed past the rider toward the wasteland. "More lights, out there, moving this way." Everyone turned. On the horizon, perhaps 5 miles distant, a convoy approached. 6 vehicles traveling together, moving with coordination that suggested military discipline rather than raider opportunism. The rider's supernatural senses extended, reading the approaching souls. Complicated mixture, guilt, determination, desperation, hope. Not raiders, not tyrants, something else. "Refugees," he said quietly, "from the coastal settlements, fleeing something." Dog's expression hardened. "There are rumors. A new warlord consolidating power in the West. Calls himself the Immortal. Claims he's building empire that makes Joes look merciful by comparison. Enslaving entire settlements. Burning those who resist." The Ghost Rider's hellfire flared involuntarily. The spirit of vengeance recognized the pattern. Power vacuums filled by worse than what preceded them. Tyrants learning from other tyrants' mistakes. Cruelty evolving to fill whatever space mercy vacated. "I'll need to investigate," the rider said, voice carrying demonic resonance that had been absent during earlier conversation. Johnny Blaze's humanity receding, the spirit's purpose reasserting itself. "If the rumors are accurate." "When you finish investigating," Dog interrupted, "when you've judged this immortal and whoever serves him, come back. We're building something here. Could use someone who ensures it doesn't become the next tyranny, who judges when judgment's needed, but shows mercy when mercy's deserved." The rider studied her. "You're asking me to stay, permanently." "I'm asking you to be part of what comes next. The wasteland's changing because you changed it. But change needs constant attention, or it reverts. You could be—" She searched for the word. "Guardian. Not ruler, not God. Just the thing that reminds people in power that consequences exist." It was tempting. Johnny Blaze's consciousness yearned for it. Purpose beyond endless hunting. Community beyond isolation. Building instead of just destroying. But the spirit of vengeance knew its nature. It was weapon, not architect. Judgment, not governance. "I'll think about it," the rider said finally. "But first..." The convoy reached the Citadel's outer perimeter. 6 vehicles, exhausted refugees stumbling out, children crying, adults carrying wounded. Their leader, woman in her 50s, face scarred by recent violence, approached Dog and the rider with mixture of hope and terror. "We heard stories," she said, voice cracking, "about a fortress that shares water freely. about a demon who kills tyrants but spares the desperate. We've been traveling for 3 weeks, lost half our people to raiders and thirst. We have nothing to trade, nothing to offer. But if the stories are true, if mercy actually exists somewhere in this hell. She fell to her knees, exhausted beyond pride. Please, help us. Dog looked at the ghost rider. The rider looked at the refugees, reading their souls, seeing their suffering, recognizing the complicated guilt of survival mixed with genuine innocence. They'd done terrible things to reach this point, yes, but necessity, not cruelty, drove their actions. Give them water, the rider said, food, medical attention, shelter until they're strong enough to decide their next move. The woman looked up, tears cutting tracks through dust on her face. Why? What's the cost? What do you want from us? Nothing, Dog said, already gesturing for volunteers to bring supplies, except that when you're strong enough, when you've rebuilt, you remember what mercy felt like, and you extend it to the next desperate souls who need it. As the refugees were led into the citadel, as water was distributed and wounds tended, the ghost rider stood at the gates watching. This was what victory looked like in the Wasteland. Not total transformation, not utopian redemption, just small acts of mercy accumulating into something that might eventually resemble hope. But the spirit of vengeance heard the woman's story about the immortal, about the new tyranny rising in the West, and knew its work wasn't finished, would never be finished, because humans built tyrannies like spiders built webs, instinctively, repeatedly, requiring constant clearing, or they choked everything. The rider mounted his motorcycle as dawn approached, painting the wasteland in shades of orange and shadow that matched his hellfire. Dog approached one final time. You're going after this immortal, she said, not a question. Yes. Will you come back? The ghost rider looked at the citadel, transformed fortress, freed people, the beginning of something better built on judgment's foundation, then looked west, toward rumors of new tyranny, new suffering, new souls requiring judgment. Yes, he said finally, when the immortals judged, when the western settlements are free, when I've reminded every would-be tyrant in this wasteland that consequences exist, then I'll come back, and maybe. Johnny Blaze's consciousness surged, adding human hope to demonic certainty. Maybe I'll stay, be the guardian you described, the one who ensures mercy survives alongside justice. I'll keep your spot at the gates, Dog promised. Witness. Witness, the rider replied. He twisted the throttle. Hellfire erupted. The demonic motorcycle launched into the dawn, leaving twin trails of molten glass across sand, heading west toward new judgment, new vengeance, new opportunities to distinguish between guilty and coerced, in a world that made everyone both simultaneously. Behind him, the citadel's water towers gleamed in rising sun, testament to what happened when tyranny fell and mercy filled the vacuum. Ahead, the wasteland stretched endlessly, full of suffering and cruelty and desperate survivors trying to build meaning from apocalypse's raw materials. The Ghost Rider had arrived in this world by accident, pulled through dimensional rift while hunting a soul through hell. He'd expected to judge and destroy, to burn through guilty and innocent alike with vengeful absolutism. Instead, he'd learned complexity, discovered that judgment without wisdom was just violence, found that vengeance could build as well as destroy, if tempered with mercy and contaminated by understanding. The wasteland would never be paradise, but it could be survivable, could be just, could be a place where tyrants fell and the desperate found mercy instead of just more cruelty. And the Ghost Rider, spirit of vengeance, Johnny Blaze's prison and partner, demon and guardian both, would ensure it stayed that way. One judgment at a time, one tyrant at a time, one act of mercy at a time. The motorcycle's roar faded into distance, but its legend remained. The burning skull that rode the fury road, that judged the wicked and spared the desperate, that brought hellfire to tyrants and hope to survivors. In the wasteland, a new religion was forming, not of chrome and glory, not of false gods and water monopolies, but of consequences and compassion, vengeance and mercy, judgment tempered by wisdom. And at its center, riding eternal on burning wheels, the Ghost Rider witnessed the transformation he'd sparked and knew his work had only just begun. The immortal waited in the west. Other tyrants lurked in every direction. The wasteland would test him, challenge him, force him to refine his understanding of guilt and innocence with every judgment. But for the first time since binding with the spirit of vengeance, Johnny Blaze felt something beyond curse, purpose that went beyond punishment, mission that built instead of just destroyed, hope that hellfire could illuminate as well as immolate. The devil had come to the wasteland, and the wasteland, impossibly, had taught the devil about mercy. The Ghost Rider's arrival shattered the wasteland's brutal equilibrium like hellfire through rusted metal. What began as dimensional accident became revolution, one burning skull against an empire of chrome-painted fanaticism and water-hoarding tyranny. Immortan Joe's fall sent shockwaves through every settlement, every war party, every warlord's fortress. Consequences existed now. Judgment rode on wheels that never needed fuel, and mercy was possible if you stopped preying on the desperate. The Citadel transformed from monument to oppression into beacon of cooperation. Gastown and the Bullet Farm learned that exploitation had costs beyond economic calculation. Raiders discovered that glory was just another word for meaningless death when facing something that judged souls rather than just killing bodies. But the Ghost Rider learned too. The wasteland taught him that vengeance without wisdom created only more suffering, that judgment required understanding context alongside cataloging sins, that even supernatural entities could evolve when confronted with moral complexity that defied absolute categories. Johnny Blaze, trapped passenger in the spirit's skull, found unexpected purpose, not just hunting the wicked, but building foundation for something better. The penance stare, weapon of pure retribution, became tool of education, showing tyrants the weight of their crimes while sparing those forced into violence by desperation. The wasteland would never be paradise. Violence would continue. Resources would remain scarce. New tyrants would eventually rise, testing whether mercy could survive alongside scarcity. But now, at least, alternatives existed. Water flowed freely in the Citadel. Trade routes established fair distribution. Communities cooperated instead of just competing. And riding through it all, a legend on burning wheels, guardian and judge, demon and savior, vengeance tempered by mercy. The Ghost Rider's journey in Mad Max's Wasteland had only begun. The immortal waited in the west. Countless smaller tyrannies infected the desert like tumors. Every sunset brought new judgments, new choices between mercy and damnation, new opportunities to prove that hellfire could illuminate path forward as well as burn path behind. In a world where everyone was guilty of something, the Ghost Rider learned to distinguish between those who killed to survive and those who killed to dominate. In a realm where gods were just men with monopolies, he demonstrated that real judgment came from entities that couldn't be killed, bribed, or corrupted. The wasteland witnessed the impossible, a demon who showed mercy, a monster who built instead of just destroyed, vengeance that chose wisdom over wrath. And somewhere in hell's corridors, dimensions away, the rift that pulled him here remained unclosed, a wound between realities, suggesting that perhaps his arrival wasn't accident, but destiny, that this broken world needed judgment from outside its own brutality to remember what justice meant. The Ghost Rider rode on, hellfire trail visible for miles, announcing to every tyrant and every survivor, consequences exist, mercy endures, and the burning skull that prowls the Fury Road judges without mercy for the cruel, but offers unexpected salvation to the desperate. The Wasteland would never be the same, and neither would the spirit of vengeance.